5.1, Forest Mitigation Banks and Forest Conservation Fund. Yeah, also let me remind you, thank you, Vice Chair, masks are still required in this building, in the hearing rooms, and in the Senate. So hopefully you will abide by that without any objection. With that, we have a number of speakers. After the Senator introduces the legislation, we're privileged to have the County Executive of Frederick County, Ms. Jan Gardner. Welcome.
Thank you.
Then after County Executive Gardner, Dominic Butchko from MACO, Lori Graff of the Builders, and Eric Fisher of CBF. And with that, Senator, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back. I appreciate you hearing us right away. This legislation allows for continued forest conservation activities after December 31st, 2020, as they have for the last couple decades. And it continues until completion of a 2021 mandated program, which I guess the date needs to be changed now, and extends the current implementation time period from 2 to 3 years to 5 to 6 years. There's an amendment clarifying that the jurisdictions approve additional acres for forest conservation if needed to meet the removed acre parts. I did hand you an amendment that the groups have agreed upon, but I know you nor the committee have had a chance to see that yet. The current program is set to sunset, so we're taking it forward. Basically, that's the program. It's just to give them more time. A lot of the small towns don't have enough money to do anything with, and it gives them time to accumulate more. And I think under this, we're still going to see that the forest or treed areas are still met according to the previous legislation or more than what's in that legislation. So that's basically it, and I'll turn it over to our county exec.
All right, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I am Frederick County Executive Jan Gardner, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today in support of Senate Bill 651. This bill makes two simple changes to the Natural Resource Act, one regarding the forest banking program and the other extending the time period for use of forest conservation funds. The first change is to restore the ability of local jurisdictions to continue to save existing mature forests under the forest banking program and to continue to preserve important forest ecosystems by removing the deadline of December 31st, 2020 for forest conservation plans to have been submitted. Through the forest banking program, Frederick County has preserved over 2,500 acres of existing forest. This constitutes 40% of the total acreage of existing forest preserved by conservation easements in Frederick County. We've been able to save forests along the scenic Monocacy River, protect habitat of rare, threatened, or endangered species, as well as protect miles of buffers along smaller tributaries and streams. The current December 31st, 2020 deadline puts these continued efforts into jeopardy. Removing this date will ensure that we can continue to bank forests through the existing program until the study on forest cover and tree canopy is completed by December 1st, 2023. Doing so will allow the findings to better inform any legislative and other changes to both the forest conservation program and the practice of forest banking. The second change is to extend the time frame by which local governments, counties, and municipalities can use deposited monies in the Forest Conservation Fund from 2 years to 5 years. This would ensure adequate time, particularly for our smaller municipalities, to more effectively and thoughtfully utilize the funding to secure plans and get agreements in place. There is an amendment that was just shared with you today by the sponsor to define qualified projects under the bill, which ensure that there is no net loss to forest under the banking program. And I think you'll hear agreement from other speakers to that. Certainly, I agree with that in Frederick County because our entire forest resource ordinance is a no net loss policy. So again, we urge your support and hope that you will issue a favorable report for Senate Bill 651.
Senator and the county executive, there are only one or two more people. Can we have them testify, and then we'll take questions? Do you have a couple minutes?
Yes.
Okay, you can stay in the first row, County Executive Gardner. Let's go to Mr. Butchko and Ms. Graff and Mr. Fisher, and then we'll take questions of all the speakers. Proceed in whatever order you choose.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you for having me here today. Dominic Butchko from the Maryland Association of Counties. Forest mitigation is an essential practice in ensuring that development does not come at the cost of our trees. SB 651 would serve to strengthen the Forest Conservation Fund. You heard the good senator summarize how. MACO has also been engaged with other organizations and the bill sponsor regarding the proposed amendment. This amendment would ensure that counties can use forest mitigation banks in the future while also securing significant forest protections that are necessary for many counties' climate and stormwater goals. Counties support these potential multi-party amendments should the committee choose to pursue a compromise approach. Accordingly, MACO asks for a favorable report on SB 651.
Good afternoon, members of the committee, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking the time to hear this bill. We, as you know, have heard from us many, many times on forest conservation. Forest mitigation banking is a really important component of the Forest Conservation Act. It both conserves and manages existing forests and plants new forests in high priority areas. We believe that this is an important piece of what we are doing. You heard House Bill 991 last year, which we worked hard on to try to preserve these rights. You also heard we have a study coming up, so I think that we'll be learning more and trying to figure out exactly where we are in the state. We did get the amendments, but we only got them right before the hearing, so we have not had a chance to figure out what the implication is in other counties, and so we are looking at that, but we do support the bill as originally written. Thank you.
Let's have Mr. Fisher, and then we'll take questions for all of the speakers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Eric Fisher, I'm the Maryland Assistant Director with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, here to support this bill with the sponsors' amendment. I am joined by more than 20 state and local environmental and smart growth organizations in that position as reflected on our testimony. It is important to plant trees along with preserving trees in order to maintain a forest footprint in our state. The bill, as would be amended, would provide this flexibility for local governments and builders while balancing mitigation and new plantings. What we see in counties and in projects that achieve full mitigation is that balance that we're looking for that protects water quality and community health. We believe that this amendment is a workable solution, and we would encourage the adoption of it along with this bill. Thank you.
Fisher, Ms. Graff, are there questions for any of the proponents on this bill? Seeing none, that completes the hearing on Senate Bill 651. Thank you, Senator Young. Thank you, County Executive Gardner. Great to have you here.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Take care, all. The next bill hearing will be on Senate Bill 466 with Senator Carter, Potomac River Compact, clarification of the effectiveness of amendments. Senator Carter, it appears that you are the witness. So.
I am traveling solo today, Madam Chair.
That's awesome. Welcome to EHE, Senator.
Thank you for having me. Good afternoon to everyone, EHE Committee. So I have a bill that is technical and non-controversial, which is completely different than most of my bills. And the reason for that is this is a bill that surfaced from my work as the Senate Chair of the Committee on Federal Relations. Delegate Al Carr, who is the House Chair, has cross-filed this bill. This bill was brought to us by the excellent staff of that committee, Scott Kennedy and Samuel Kist. They pointed out that we needed a clarification in the law. It should be very simple, technical clarification. Basically, the Potomac River Compact is an agreement between Maryland and Virginia that governs the Potomac River Fisheries Commission. The commission regulates fisheries in the mainstream tidal Potomac River. in 2007 and 2013, Maryland and Virginia amended the compact to enact laws that contained several common provisions. However, due to different arrangements of the common provisions in each state's annotated code, the inclusion of the other provisions in Virginia law were not included in the Maryland law, and the enacted laws failed to mirror each other. This sowed confusion around whether certain language requirements had been fulfilled and whether the common provisions appeared in each state's annotated code as being in effect. This ultimately led Maryland and Virginia to treat the compact inconsistently. Senate Bill 466, along with efforts by Virginia to clarify its annotated code, will enable consistent treatment of the common provisions. From the 2007 and 2013 amendments that the bill clarifies are in effect increased the compensation of the commission members and changed the allowable oyster inspection tax and increased the maximum fine for violating commission regulations. Senate Bill 466 is a technical bill that will simply ensure the clarity of the compact provisions in the Maryland Annotated Code. It's a short bill, and so I would move for a favorable report.
Thank you, Senator Carter. Are there questions for the good senator? Seeing none, I think you might need to redo your brand to be the non-controversial senator. Before we complete the hearing on this, I just want to give a shout out to the late delegate, my friend and the district right next door, Jean Cryer, who did a lot of work on the Potomac River Compact during her tenure before she died way too soon of cancer. So
She did. I served with Delegate Cryer on the House Judiciary Committee many years ago.
nice.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Senator Carter. Be well. That completes the hearing on Senate Bill 466. Next up, Senate Bill 64, Senator Carosa, one of our own. And that bill is the Beach Erosion Control District State and City-Owned Structure. In addition to Senator Carosa, we are going to hear from Bruce Bariano, and that is it. I don't see Mr. Bariano here yet, but when he arrives, he can come and join you, Senator. You may begin your testimony.
Well, thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and it's good to be here with my colleagues on the committee. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to present and ask for your support of Senate Bill 64, the Beach Erosion Control District, State and City-Owned Structures as amended. And this legislation has been requested by the town of Ocean City. This bill exempts the repair, renovation, reconstruction, or expansion of an existing structure owned by the state or by the mayor and city council of Ocean City from an existing prohibition on construction activity within the Beach Erosion Control District, as long as the project does not result in any significant permanent environmental damage to the district as determined by the Department of Natural Resources. And let me explain, under current law, any construction activity, with the exception of some specific narrow exceptions, is prohibited already in this Beach Erosion Control District. And what that means is that under current law, certain important Ocean City facilities cannot be repaired or replaced, including the Ocean City Amusement Pier, the Ocean City Inlet Parking Lot, and the Ocean City Life Saving Museum, which I'm holding up for you to show. Senate Bill 64, as amended, would provide a mechanism to repair and replace with specific limitations to add to these existing facilities with the approval of the Ocean City Mayor and Council and the Secretary of the Department of Natural Resources. This bill only applies to existing facilities owned by the state or Ocean City. And I wanted my colleagues to understand that the immediate need for passage of SB 64 is to bring the Ocean City Life Saving Museum, built in 1891, into compliance with the federal Americans for Disabilities Act and the current fire safety codes. With the passage of last year's capital budget in the Maryland General Assembly, we approved $600,000 for ADA upgrades to be made at the Ocean City Life Saving Museum. However, based on review by the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, DNR cannot approve the ADA upgrades work at the Ocean City Life Saving Museum without a legislative change to Section 8-1102 of the Natural Resources article. We in Ocean City are very excited about the upgrades to the Ocean City Life Saving Museum, as this site truly is the heart of telling Ocean City's story and the history of the U.S. Life-Saving Service. This bill takes a responsible approach on allowing this priority project and other projects to move forward by making it clear that it applies only to existing facilities, must have the approval of the Ocean City Mayor Council and the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, and must not result in any significant permanent environmental damage. I respectfully ask for a favorable report of SB 64, and I invite each one of you to an adventure to visit the Ocean City Life Saving Museum in the future. Thank you for your kind consideration.
Thank you, Senator Carosa. I just have a quick question. In the folder is an amendment that's been drafted. I don't know if I heard you speak to the amendment, if you want to explain what that does.
The amendment was just meant to further narrow the bill.
Okay. Colleagues, any questions for Senator Carosa? Seeing none. Welcome, Senator Simon-Ayer, just in time to ask Senator Carosa questions. Let's see. Bruce Bariano has not yet arrived, and also signed up here is Thomas Lilly. Is Mr. Lilly in the room? Okay. Seeing none and seeing no questions, that completes the hearing on Senate Bill 64. Thank you, Senator Carosa. The next bill before us is Senate Bill 537, also Senator Carosa, Department of Natural Resources, Shrimp Fishery Regulations, Clarification. If Earl Gwynn wants to is interested
Mr.
in-
Sonny Gwynn, would you please join us?
All right. Sonny Gwynn, Robert Brown. Oh, is Robert T. Brown here? He can come up, and James Mullen are the three witnesses who can come up to the table if you like, or if it's too crowded, you may sit in the front row. We're still trying to do socially distanced. Okay. All right. Thank you,
Okay.
Senator Carosa. You may begin your
All
testimony.
right. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. And I thank you again and my colleagues, and appreciate the opportunity to present Senate Bill 537. This is the Department of Natural Resources, a shrimp fishery regulation clarification. And this bill is clarifying legislation on the Maryland Department of Natural Resources authority to adopt regulations for the new shrimp fishery. You all may recall that the Maryland General Assembly, with the support of this committee, passed Senate Bill 343 last session to create a new shrimp fishery, requiring licensing to engage in the fishery and giving the Maryland Department of Natural Resources broad authority to develop and manage the fishery. The pilot project was to go into effect last June. Since the passage of last year's bill, there is need for clear guidance specifically over the parameters and potential conflicts with existing regulations created for other fisheries that do not apply to this new shrimp fishery. Previously, commercial shrimp harvesting has always been thought to be feasible only in southern waters. However, recent findings have concluded that shrimp are in our Atlantic coast waters, and the harvesting of them will create a new economic boost as well as contribute to local and state revenues. During these current uncertain times with supply chain issues and food shortages, our commercial seafood harvesters consistently provide local, relatively inexpensive, unprocessed, healthy food choices. But our watermen are taking a risk when they engage in a new fishery. They deserve our support in making this pilot project a workable, flexible alternative. Madam Vice Chair and colleagues, I respectfully urge the committee, my committee members, for a favorable report on Senate Bill 537, which simply clarifies regulations for this new shrimp fishery so that we can move forward. Thank you for your kind attention and consideration of this bill.
Thank you, Senator Carosa. We've got Earl Sonny Gwynn. You're the lead witness. You get up to 5 minutes. You do not have to use all of your time. There is no opposition to this bill.
Thank you very much. My name's Sonny Gwynn, and first of all, I'd like to thank you for passing 343. It was a stepping stone to this bill of 537. As a lifelong commercial fisherman, I fish for lobster down in Ocean City, Maryland, and when I come in, the tourist and consumer alike come down there and enjoy fresh lobsters off my boat. And now that we're seeing shrimp along our coast, we would like to have the DNR to have authority on allowing us to catch and sell these shrimp, just like we've been doing off the boat. So the tourist and the consumer can enjoy them, just like they've been enjoying seafood down in Ocean City for the last lots of years. So we'd like to see a favorable result with this bill. Thank you.
Mr. Gwynn, and next, Mr. Mullen.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jim Mullen. I'm with the Maryland Oystermen's Association, and we are in favor of this bill since the shrimp fishery is a new emerging industry in the state of Maryland, provides some employment opportunities. Also, in talking to Senator Carosa, it's beginning to provide some guidance moving forward for setting up the goals and objectives for a sustainable fishery, and one that'll set up some parameters to work in moving forward. So with that, we're in favor of it because as this keeps emerging, it helps us set up some, what's the word I'm looking for? Like a comprehensive plan maybe, or some type of bylaws. So it's very helpful moving forward to set the structure up. So
Great.
That's why we're in favor. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Mullen. If we could have Robert T. come forward, and Mr. Gwynn, if you could maybe shift back to the front row so we can have socially distanced and have Mr. Brown give his testimony, and then we'll take any questions from the committee to all four of you.
Chair,
Mr. Brown,
Vice Chair.
welcome. Happy New Year.
My name is Robert T. Brown. I'm President of the Maryland Watermen's Association, Chair and Vice Chair, and members of this committee. This is a new industry that's came into the lower part of the Chesapeake Bay, and hopefully it'll be one that expands in more parts of the bay. What we need is just some clarification to get it so the Department of Natural Resources has a authority to make it legal for us to harvest this part of the seafood industry. And we're favorable on this, and thank you very much.
Thank all four of you for your testimony. I see a question from Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Thank you for this interesting bill, Senator Carosa. So the shrimp fishery has a potential to be a new commercially harvested seafood product. Is that the?
So last year, thank you, Senator, for the question. Last year, we passed legislation that established the shrimp fishery, which was the first step. Now we're coming back to say we need to put the guidelines and regulations in place for the second step to move forward with the pilot program.
Okay, thank you. So the shrimp, they're there in the waters?
They are, but I'll let the watermen respond to that.
In the lower part of the bay, and especially on the eastern shore side, they are going, they got some casting nets that they've been throwing out and could catch, a good number of shrimp, 30, 40, 50 pounds in a run of a day. And that's not the best technique or most efficient way to catch them. It's a part of our industry that we need to develop to help take pressure off other things that we do in the seafood industry.
So,
If a person's out shrimping, they're not catching crabs, they're not fishing or something. So
Yes.
the
Thank
more
you.
stuff we get into our industry that we can diversify, the better
Yeah.
off we are.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that. So in the absence of regulation, that means you cannot commercially fish them, or
Well,
what if there's no rule governing shrimp fishery, and you catch shrimp, or any other species for that matter, that's not any rules, right? Does that mean you can't keep, or you have to?
Well, the department has to have regulations on how we did catch them, what kind of gear we can use, and all this stuff. When we would catch them as bycatch, I thought it was good to do, but the department says they need to have regulations on it, so we.
So without the regulation, you can't keep, is that what you're saying?
Well, You're not, it doesn't say you can't keep them, but it doesn't say you can sell them
Okay, so that means you can't sell them?
without,
Or is
without
this-
license and,
Without a license?
yeah.
Okay, okay, thanks for that. Okay, appreciate it.
You all, I see no other questions for the panel, so that completes the hearing on Senate Bill 537. Mr. Bariano, I called you twice for the prior bill. Are you here for another bill, or are you here for Senate Bill 64?
I think we're okay.
Yeah.
Senate Bill
I'm a-
64, I was before the Senate Finance Committee, and I'm here on another bill later on.
I think we're okay.
That hearing's over. We're moving on to 695.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, the good senator will be followed by Beth Hill, Bill Miles, Joe Henson. You may come up or sit in the first row behind the good senator. This is 695, Voluntary Firewood
up
Treatment
here.
Certification Program.
And then you guys sit in the back, too. So we're just spaced out. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee for allowing me to present Senate Bill 695, Natural Resources Volunteer Firewood Treatment Certification Program Establishment. Now, this legislation establishes the Voluntary Firewood Treatment Certification Program within the Maryland Department of Natural Resources to certify forest product operators who export firewood to other states and use heat treatment and other procedures to prevent the presence of wood pests in the firewood products. This program, authorized by 695, is voluntary. It applies only to those operators with commercial firewood dry kilns who would like state certification. And I wanted to bring to my attention why this legislation now. The sense of urgency to establish a firewood treatment certification program at the state level at this time is due to the United States Department of Agriculture's decision earlier this year to end its certification of commercial dry kiln operations for firewood for controlling the spread of emerald ash borers EAB. Since Maryland currently does not have a certification program, nor does it have the statutory authority to create one, SB 695 is necessary to allow existing operators in Maryland to continue to export their firewood products to other states. This certification program can be established at minimal cost in the Department of Natural Resources, and it will have a strong positive impact on Maryland's forestry business by continuing existing export sales and by providing new opportunities to export firewood to other states. The Maryland Forest Association leadership, Beth Hill, is here, as well as Joe Henson and the American Forest Industry representative, Bill Miles. They will go into more detail on the importance of this legislation to Maryland's forest industry. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 695, establishing a voluntary certification program at the state level to allow Maryland's forest operators to continue to export their firewood products to other states. Thank you for your kind consideration.
Thank you, Senator. Let's go with Ms. Hill.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman and committee members, for allowing me the opportunity to voice my support for the establishment of a voluntary firewood treatment program. Senator Carosa did a fantastic job explaining the legislation. For the record, I'm Beth Hill, Executive Director of the Maryland Forest Association. We represent the entire forest community statewide. We are a conservation-minded group that wants to see forest remain as forest. 70% of our members are family forest landowners that depend on foresters, loggers, and manufacturers to care for their land. Our members' top reasons for concern are lack of markets, forest health, and development pressure. We believe the forest that pays stays. Strong markets are key to conservation efforts and maintaining forest health. Our organization worked closely with both MDA and DNR to develop the language of this bill, which gives the Department of Natural Resources the authority to inspect and certify kilns that are used to dry and heat treat firewood, to make sure that it's operated to standards designed to control the spread of forest pests such as the emerald ash borer, gypsy moth, and the spotted lanternfly. As Senator Carosa said, historically, USDA APHIS provided this certification, but they are discontinuing the program and turning it over to the states. Currently, no agency in Maryland has the authority to provide this service. Supporting existing entrepreneurs that anchor the industry, encouraging innovation in emerging sectors, and enhancing market opportunities were all overarching goals as part of the recently completed Forestry Economic Adjustment Strategy. The EAS was a 2-year study that gathered stakeholder and agency input from across the state to develop an action plan to recover the declining forestry sector. In summary, MFA supports Senate Bill 695. This voluntary program is essential to retain and expand markets across the state. Therefore, we respectfully ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Mr. Miles or Mr. Henson, in whatever order you choose.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Joe Henson. I'm a consulting forester in Salisbury, Maryland, and I work with both those that produce commercial firewood and those who have considered entering that market. As a forester, just a couple of comments about the kind of trees that make their way into firewood. These are typically smaller, less desirable species, often crooked, sometimes hollow trees that are always a component of any hardwood or mixed hardwood pine stand. Foresters choose to remove these and then concentrate the growth on the remaining trees. But it's uneconomical to do that unless you have a market for them. A very common logging prescription, particularly on the eastern shore, is to thin pine stands and leave the oaks and hickories that have a much higher wildlife value and remove the sweet gums and maples, turn them into firewood or some other product because they have much less wildlife values. This diversifies the stands and produces much higher wildlife values overall. So the loggers sort those trees out, take them to a firewood plant. They're cut into little 18-inch lengths, put in a dry kiln, dried, packaged. USDA has always provided certification that the kilns operate at the right temperature, give you a little sticker, and you can export that. They're backing away from that, and so this bill establishes a small but vital program for the state to perform that role. It'll allow continued operation of existing operations and remove an instantaneous, insurmountable barrier for those that might enter the market.
Thank you. Mr. Miles.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you so much. Bill Miles on behalf of the forest products industry through a group called AFI. The long and the short of this thing is this emerald ash borer has basically won. The feds are backing away because they can no longer control this emerald ash borer. So as a result, the states have been left to themselves to come up with their own plan on how to deal with this emerald ash borer, this very, very infectious tree-killing bug. And right now, since the feds now have walked away, and they're focusing now on something what they call biocontrol. These little tiny wasps that they release out there amongst these ash trees, and they go in and they kill the emerald ash borer. All these other efforts to try to control it nationwide have failed, so the feds have said, okay, we can't do it, states are on your own. So right now, Maryland, and there's about 145 firewood operators in Maryland that would benefit from this bill, and the states, there are 9 states right now that says you cannot sell any Maryland firewood in our states unless you have a certification program administered by a state agency, which in this case would be the Department of Natural Resources. So in essence, the states have to step up. We'll have no markets in other states for our wood if they're not certified through these kiln-dry processes. It kills, these heat kills, and that's what the bill does. and we understand the DNR supports the bill. It's a good program, and it'll help the forest products industry keep these markets and open markets right now that are closed to them while we fight the emerald ash borer ourselves.
Thank you. Committee questions for any of the panelists? Senator, please, you're a sponsor. Come up to the table if you would. Yes, Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sir, you said several times wildlife value for certain trees like maple.
Yeah.
So what do you define as wildlife value? How?
Thank you for the question, Senator. Typically, wildlife values are measured by food production. And so oaks, hickories, they produce mast, nuts, usually every year, some years heavier than others. And that's a preferred food for deer, wild turkeys, squirrels, birds of all types, wild cherries the same way. So those mass-producing trees are the ones that have the highest wildlife values. Maples and sweet gum don't produce anything of that nature that wildlife particularly favors. So we take those out and concentrate on diversifying the stand with more oaks and hickories.
Great, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. I'm reading the fiscal note. The current law explains that there is a forest product operator's license.
That's correct.
But you want to move to a certification in addition to the license? Is it because you want to have more review to make sure the kiln level and everything else is up to standard?
Yes.
To kill the ash borer? Is that, I just want to understand this.
Yes, sir. The certification is for dry kills that dry and heat treat firewood, only for that. And typically, those kills operate at much higher temperatures and for longer periods of time than is necessary to meet pest control standards. And so what DNR would do in this case is come out to those sites that have kills probably once a year, inspect the kill records, make sure that the measurements they take agree with what the kill records say, and then they say, yep, that dry kill is operating at standards to meet pest control needs, and we hereby certify that and the firewood that comes from it.
Well, let me ask you a question. I know some people who sell in Maryland, some heat their wood, some don't. Some let it naturally season, some, as I understand it, will actually treat the wood to get out the moisture to a greater degree. Do we care if that firewood sold locally still has tree borer in it because it could rear its ugly head other place in Maryland?
Well, emerald ash borer is statewide now, and as Bill said, the bugs have won on that one. We certainly care on something like spotted lanternfly, and there are quarantine areas that the state has established, and our loggers, for example, have to take training to identify egg masses and how to make sure that any logs that move out of those quarantine areas don't have spotted lanternflies with them.
Yeah.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions and no opponents with oral testimony, thank you for your patience and testimony. That concludes Senate Bill 695.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We'll move on to 522. I'm sorry? Okay. We'll move to Child Safe Zone Program Establishment, Equitable Access to Safe Parks Act. If Adam Rosenberg, Jeff Stager, and Steve Johnson want to move towards the front, the good senator should be here momentarily. Are any of those people here? Maybe they're coming in with her. Yeah. I would assume the entourage Accompanying the good senator from Baltimore County includes Adam Rosenberg, Jeffrey Steger, and Steve Johnson.
Let me get Steve.
This is 522 State and Local Parks Child Safe Zone Program. Welcome, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Shelley Heddleman, Senator from District 11, and I am here today to present Senate Bill 522. This bill is about creating Child Safe Zone program within the Department of Natural Resources. Senate Bill 522 is about welcoming children and their families to our state and local parks. It's about sending a message that our parks are treasured retreats from the stress of our lives, and that we can do all as we can as a state government to ensure that parks are safe places. This is especially important for children who do not yet, many of them don't yet have the skills to process stress or trauma that they may have experienced. And being in nature is healing for these children and for these families. And anything we can do to actively and affirmatively send a message that our parks are special, even sacred spaces, is important to clearly communicate to families that they are welcome and safe there. This bill creates child-safe zones intended to send a warm welcome, not a warning, to families, and to back up that welcome with specific types of capital improvements and enhanced operations that will enhance the safe design of the space. And this, to be clear, is not about, don't go on that rock, you might fall off. It's about public safety. This is where CPTED comes in, crime prevention through environmental design. Designing and maintaining physical spaces with crime prevention in mind avoids the need for additional policing or enforcement. And prioritizing crime prevention on the front end proactively secures these public spaces and helps users create a community feeling as they use the space. So instead, perhaps, of hiring additional security personnel, this park is designed with open landscaping to allow for natural surveillance, where people can see all around them and feel comfortable interacting with fellow park visitors around them instead of avoiding them. I have some experts who are here today, and I just want to take a minute to introduce one of our witnesses, is Steve Johnson. He's the president of Pimlico Terrace Neighborhood Association in good Senator Washington's district, where he has brought a number of students with him from the Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys. And these are 8th graders who have come to learn today about the legislative process. And I was sort of quizzing them out in the hallway a little bit about why they were here and why this bill is important to them, and they had some really good answers. So the details of the bill creates a mandatory appropriation in the Department of Natural Resources to create this Child Safe Zone Fund, to provide funding for operating expenses related to enhancement of public safety. It will support the installation of signage in prominent places around state parks and local parks, that the park is a child-safe zone, facilitate collaboration with local jurisdictions, and to use for other capital improvements to improve the infrastructure. For example, enhanced lighting. And there's a lot of evidence to support the notion that even enhanced lighting can reduce crime on average of 20%. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to my panel, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
If you don't mind, Senator Heddleman, if we can get through their presentations, then we'll open up for questions.
Of course.
Okay, please.
Good afternoon, Senators. Mr. Chairman, thank you for hearing today. Senator Heddleman, Senator Elfer, thank you for introducing Senate Bill 522. My name is Adam Rosenberg, and I am the Vice President of Violence Intervention and Prevention at LifeBridge Health, a community health system in many of your neighborhoods and communities throughout Maryland, as well as the Executive Director of LifeBridge's new Center for Hope, our comprehensive response to violence. It incorporates the former Baltimore Child Abuse Center, as well as our domestic violence programs, community safe streets programs, our hospital violence response, and an elder abuse program there. I'm normally in judiciary. It's a pleasure to be here today with all of you. I'm testifying in support of Senate Bill 522 to create and promote safe spaces to play for children here in Maryland. Maryland has one of the great park systems in America, and among the legislation this session is more legislation to enhance that great park system that we have and that have that next great phase of park enhancement and building throughout Maryland there. Parks were created for all people to enjoy, regardless of wealth or community or age or access. It is that one neutral central space that people can come to connect, to ambulate, to become healthy again. And certainly during the last 2 years of COVID, they were one of the few universally safe and free spaces of refuge for all of our families and children to gather and to play, and frankly, to take off a mask and feel normal and safe again. Parks are truly critical for our health and development. Unfortunately, parks do not always feel safe, nor are they safe spaces for children and families, both from incidents which occur in parks and the after effect after violence has occurred in a park. In October 2021, a woman was found dead in a burning car near Leakin Park. During the investigation, it was found she was shot as well. Leakin Park itself has had 79 bodies found in it since 1946. It is no wonder people do not feel safe sending their children to play there. Baltimore police officer Kiana Holly was shot at Curtis Bay Park, turning that safe space into a crime scene. And in November 2021, a 13-year-old child, Malia Turner, was shot to death across the street from Pauline Fauntleroy Park. These communal spaces lose their sanctity of safety when they're associated with murder and crime. It is unjust for children to have to play among crime scenes and spaces associated with violence, and thus another safe space is lost. What Senate Bill 522 aims to do is to promote safety within these spaces so children, families, community members feel safe when they get to a park there. LifeBridge Health and our Center for Hope takes a wide-ranging approach to keeping everyone healthy. And safe spaces to play and recreate are critical to well-being and critical to that prescription for health. Recreation, fresh air, outdoor space are very real and very important elements towards helping anyone heal from trauma, especially children, and to be free from exposure for violence. These are children who are also growing up throughout the state, and certainly in Baltimore and other parts of our state, in violent communities. And to be able to have a space where there's no gunshots, and there's no violence on the ground, and there's not crime scene tape, I think is so critical for our kids' well-being there. Violence is a public health issue, and our state's approach to health and to safety must include our parks as well. What you'll hear next is about what Senator Hettleman mentioned, crime prevention through environmental design, known as CEPTED. The National Institute of Crime Prevention is a strong proponent of this and forms the basis of this legislation and the work that we're looking towards there. Their association president, Arthur Hushin, strongly believes that child safe zones can be designed to be effective in reducing crime in parks, and believes, and I quote, "The proper design and effective use of the built-in environment can lead to a reduction in the fear and the incidence of crime and to an improvement in the quality of life." Truly, if we are looking for quality of life improvements and ways to be able to promote health and safety for our community there is no better way to do this than to enhance our parks, which impact everybody throughout our state. And I encourage a favorable report on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the committee for allowing me to testify today in support of SB 522, Child Safe Zone Program, providing equitable access to safe parks. My name is Jeff Steger, S-T-E-G-E-R. I'm retired from the Arlington County, Virginia Police Department. I have trained thousands of officers in the concept of CEPTED, Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design, and have conducted hundreds of security assessments of public safety buildings, parks, recreation areas, schools, housing communities, public housing communities, and others. I recognize that public safety is a key element of the redevelopment of communities and community policing, and I'm acutely aware of the impact of violence and crime in our communities and on the health outcomes of residents of these communities. And I would just mention also that I conducted the assessment of the trolley trail that runs from College Park, Maryland into Washington, D.C. This bill would help communicate in a strong way that parks are a safe place for children and families to congregate, creating community interaction and providing a respite from the pressures of daily life. And for children who are exposed to violence of any kind in their lives, having a place where they can play safely and engage socially and not worry about crime is critical to their recovery and happiness. As the need for parks, recreation areas, open space, green space, and linear trails has increased over the past few years, so too has there been an increase in the need for safety and security of those spaces. Law enforcement cannot be the answer. Designing parks with safety and security in mind is much more cost-effective than simply adding manpower with law enforcement or security personnel. Crime prevention through environmental design, the concept of SEPTED. Crime prevention is, it's based on the belief that the proper design and the effective use of the built environment can lead to a reduction in the fear and incidence of crime and an improvement in the quality of life. Oh, did I have
I'm sorry, yep.
Oh, I was told I had 5
No,
minutes, I'm sorry.
Why don't you wrap up just another sentence?
I hope you'll support the bill.
Perfect. That's always the best wrap-up.
Sorry.
And I am guessing that you are Stephen Robinson. No, Johnson. I can't read. Sorry, Pimlico Terrace Neighborhood Association. Welcome, Mr. Johnson.
Good afternoon and greetings, Senators, greeting Chair. Thank you so much, Senator Washington, for hosting our young men in her office from the Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys, who you see behind us, clad in their nice uniforms, as well as Ms. Waters, their history and science teacher. Thank you so much for having us today. I am Stephen Johnson. I am the president for the Pimlico Terrace Neighborhood Association, as well as the year coordinator at Baltimore Collegiate School for Boys, here in support of Senate Bill 522. I'm here supporting the Child Safe Zone program, which provides equitable and access and safety to parks. As the president of the Pimlico Terrace Neighborhood Association, located in Central Park Heights, public safety is a crucial element when it comes to redevelopment of our community. Night in and night out, we hear of tragedies in our community due to violence and crime, which continually piles on the depressing weight of trauma onto our children and young people. This bill helps communicate in a strong way that parks are a safe place for children and families to congregate, creating community interaction and providing a safe haven for children, family, and the community. Parks and green spaces should be a place to come to find peace, to breathe fresh air, and escape the social ills which have become norms in our society. Studies show that children who are exposed to peace, love, and cleanliness do better academically, socially, and emotionally. Children deserve a place where they can play safely and engage socially, which is critical to their growth as they too will be adults one day. In addition to seeing signs that park users that the park is a safe child zone, park users will also benefit from seeing improvement to parks that deter violence and crime. Better lighting and access points, aesthetically pleasing landscaping, and intentionally enhanced security measures will enhance public safety in these settings and encourage the community to utilize and appreciate our parks and green spaces. On behalf of the Pimlico Terrace Neighborhood Association, it will be of great benefit and reward to our community, our city, and society that Senate Bill 522 is given favorable support. I'm your community partner in safety, Stephen T. Johnson, President of Pimlico Terrace Neighborhood Association.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Before we take questions, Ms. Waters, could you have your students stand up? And since Senator Hedelman and Senator Washington were kind enough to bring you all down here, we want to say hello, and we're really glad that you're with us today. So how do we want to do this? Do you want to, let's just do really quickly your first name and last name and what your favorite park is, but really loudly so it can be heard on the camera, okay? Let's start over here. The gentleman in the fabulous tie. Go for it. And your favorite park. This is about parks, right? Tell us your favorite park, Dante. All right. The gentleman in burgundy. Okay, then we got 3 guys there. Go for it. Druid Hill.
My name is Dewan Miller, and I don't really have a favorite park. Sometimes I go to a city and Patuxent Park.
Okay.
Zion Roberts, I don't really have a favorite park.
Okay. All right. Yes, sir. Uh-huh.
Hello. My name is Clayton Thomas, and my favorite park is Patterson Park.
Patterson Park. Okay. Go ahead. Yep.
My name is Kyle Williams, and I live in Patterson. My name is Kaden Sakal. My favorite park is Patterson Park.
Okay, another Patterson. Okay.
My name is Xavier Hunter. I don't have a favorite park.
Okay.
My name is Michael Westbrook. My favorite park is Patterson Park.
All right, Michael, you got cool hair. Ms. Waters, you want to share what yours is?
So I also do not have a favorite park, but I know the benefits of parks, and I would love my students to be able to go to safe, well-lit
beautifully designed parks.
There you go. That's what this bill's about. That's why Senator Hedelman brought this bill. So we're really glad that you're here, because you're the reason that we're going to be debating and discussing this bill, right? So thank you for taking the time to come to Annapolis. I see that Senator Gallion has a question, and Senator Patterson. Let's go with Senator Gallion first.
Good afternoon, Senator. A couple questions. Would this bill make all state parks have that child safe zone designation? Would it be for all the state parks?
It's available for all state parks, yes.
Okay, because we want all of our state and local parks to be.
Absolutely.
So, okay, that was all I wanted to know. Thank you.
Vice Chair, I'd just like to welcome all the students here from my park, Patterson Park.
Can you explain that, Madam Vice Chair?
Yes, I'm about to.
Thank
For those of you who may not know, the good senator's name is Senator Patterson. So obviously, even though he represents the people of Prince George's County and the whole state, he's making a joke that the park is named for him. Senator Washington, do you want to say anything to these folks?
Yes, first of all, I wanted to say that your school is located in the 43rd District, but Senator Carter is actually, their professor's, Pimlico is in her district, so I don't want to get in trouble with claiming you, although I would love to claim you as a resident. And then also, yes, we had a great visit in my office, and I really support, especially, and thank the senator for bringing this bill, looking at environmental opportunities and enhancements to improve public safety. We should probably do this in our schools as well. So perhaps next year we'll look at that approach. But I did want to ask you on the bill, this is just on the bill, I did notice that there was a provision, it says that the grant can be used for law enforcement. I don't know if you know that it's in the bill as well.
So
and you didn't notice that, so I was, thought this was about capital and enforcing on that.
Thank you for raising that, and I did not mention it, but there is an amendment to actually take that out.
Okay, great, thank you.
So I appreciate you raising that issue.
And then also, in terms of the testimony, because I guess I was confused a little bit, or it could be drawn off as similar as Gallion, as Senator Gallion, because the examples you just gave were in Baltimore City, and so I didn't know if there was other places where we're trying to improve safety, and then also I think it's well known, that in terms of the murders, that's it's a place where they deposit the bodies. I mean, that's not a good thing, but I didn't want anyone to walk away with the idea that these murders are occurred in the park itself. So I support the bill. I support. You're right, everyone should feel safe, but I just feel in terms of the testimony, we want to make sure people understand what you really meant.
Sure, and I just want to follow up to make it clear, both with what your comment was and Senator Gallion's, that also local governments can apply to this fund for municipal parks and local parks too.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Washington. Senator Ellis.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, and thank you for this bill, Senator Hillman. And so, trying to bring more parks, availability of parks, and one of the things, a lot of parks in my district, which is Charles County, a lot of parks don't have like basketball courts. And so, if I was vice chair, I would ask all these young men, do you like to play basketball? But I'm not, so I won't. But,
actually, since I have the mic, I can ask them if they play Scrabble. Because you can play Scrabble in the parks too, and there are teen leagues and stuff, so.
Yeah, and so, I definitely welcome this bill to bring more people into parks and bring more parks into Maryland. And you mentioned, Senator Hillman, in your testimony that some of the techniques you would, the bill would encourage is like line of sight to take out impediments. And so I think of line of sight issues in parks. And we have some great parks in Charles County, mainly in the outskirts of our urban area, trees and shrubbery. And so is that part of the idea behind line of sight, taking out shrubberies and that might block.
Actually, I would love to turn it over to Mr. Steger, who is really the expert on the environmental design, if I could.
Yeah, natural surveillance encourages.
So,
Oh, I'm
hold the
sorry.
microphone back.
Natural surveillance encourages raising the canopy of the trees in any locality up from 6 to 8 feet so that you have great sight lines underneath of that. Shrubbery lowered to about 3 to 4 feet, and that encourages good sight lines.
So when you say raise the canopy, so you'll cut the lower branches?
Yes, yes.
And so the leaves are still there on the tree?
Absolutely,
But
so you
higher?
do not damage the tree,
Okay.
right.
And so with shrubbery that are lower to the ground, what's the technique?
To lower that shrubbery to 3 to 4 feet so that you have a good sight line over top of the shrubbery.
Okay, great.
So if you stand at the end of the park, you can see clear through.
Okay, great.
And
Thank
that's
you.
natural surveillance.
Okay, thanks.
Senator Heddleman, I just have a quick question. It talks about signage, and since I assume that the Department of Natural Resources is watching or listening, I just want to make sure that I'm a little bit in my brand here about language access and just making sure that they try to think about graphics and not just words, so that all people can understand that this is going to be a safe park.
Absolutely.
Okay. And with that, I just want to give a shout out and say thank you again to the students for being with us. You are why we are here. We all care about the future of the state of Maryland, and you are our future. And so we want you to have great schools and great parks and great job opportunities and great experiences for you to grow up and be successful and safe and happy. So thank you for coming. Make sure that you stay engaged with your government, because you've got a lot of smart people working for you here, and you should stay in touch with all of us. Okay, with that, Senator Heddleman, thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
That completes the hearing on Senate Bill 522.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Johnson, thank you for your community leadership.
Absolutely, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank
All
you,
right, the
Vincent.
next hearing is going to be Senate Bill 830, and we have the senator from the home district here, District 30, Senator Elfreth. The bill is, let's give a moment for folks to leave so we get lots of attention on Senator Elfreth.
In the
Okay,
meantime, Madam Chair, I'm just so thrilled that everybody's enthusiasm for parks. I think it's the year of
Right?
parks. Yes.
Exactly. Well, it's one of the very few modest silver linings about the coronavirus,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
We've all enjoyed our parks. So we are now starting Senate Bill 830, Senator Elfreth, natural resources, oysters, spat, shells, and substrate. And we have, this committee has learned a bunch about that over the years. So welcome, and why don't you bring up some of your witnesses to the front row while you're here. We've got Dave Namazi and Paul Shurik, and lead witness Ann Swanson from the Chesapeake Bay Commission.
Wonderful. Thank
You may
you,
begin.
Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. Here to present Senate Bill 830, a bill to make critical investments in sustaining one of Maryland's most important keystone species, the eastern oyster. 830 is entirely about supply. How can we increase spat production, expand shell retention, better understand our own bay's bottom, and coordinate research to chart a path forward to increase oyster abundance across the Chesapeake Bay? SB 830 provides essential investments that will grow oyster abundance, improve water quality, and provide for Maryland's economy. You'll notice that SB 830 is devoid of policy. It is really about the investments in supply and reflects much of the consensus built over the last number of years. And each piece of the bill builds off another. Maryland needs more oyster shells to help both with natural spat set and increased spat on shell production. Increased spat on shell production will help bolster oyster abundance across the bay. The Bay Bottom Survey provided for in this bill, last conducted in the 1970s and 1980s, and in many cases we still use Yates maps that were mapped at the turn of the 20th century. All of this, including the collaborative research on substrate, will help us better map, understand, and plan for the future of repletion, aquaculture, and restoration of the oyster. There are kind of three buckets, Madam Vice Chair, in the bill, so I'll break them down kind of by bucket. The first is to ensure that Maryland retains and increases our abundance of shell. This legislation will do two things. It will revitalize and transform the oyster shell recycling tax credit. Many of you, I hope, when you go to a restaurant, particularly in Annapolis, you go to a restaurant that recycles its oyster shells. We want to retain that shell as much as possible. That shell recycling tax credit is due to sunset in 2023, and we thought it could use a refresher. So we're transforming it from a tax credit to a grant and expanding it not just for restaurants, but also to dealers and to nonprofits if there's a community oyster roast. We want to retain that shell and provide a small grant to that community association for going to the trouble of recycling that shell. It also, the bill directs an additional $1 million to Marbidco for the purposes of incentivizing more Maryland-based shucking houses. Yes?
Find Marbidco for those who may be watching and don't know what that is.
Gosh, it's a long,
I know.
Maryland, what's the acronym stand for? I know. Maryland Agricultural, yeah, Senator Gallion can do it. Okay. It's an agency that provides economic development opportunities, particularly around agriculture. Okay, thank you. I haven't thought about that acronym in a long time. Okay, so how do we build on Maryland's rich history of shucking houses? Folks may remember Annapolis, my district, City Dock, once upon a time was chock full of shucking houses. City Dock actually is built on old oyster shell and dirt. But they used to be abundant across the Chesapeake Bay. Unfortunately, we've not. Many of them closed over the last century. This bill provides a small incentive to rehabilitate and restart those shucking houses to help us retain the shell in Maryland. We're purchasing a lot of shell from Virginia. This is an opportunity for us to retain that shell in Maryland. Number two, so that's the shell portion of the bill. When it comes to mapping, so we can strategically use that shell and spat and substrate, the bill provides for two things. It requires the Maryland Geological Survey, in conjunction with the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Studies, to undertake the first bay bottom survey last conducted in the 1980s. Again, we don't have the most accurate picture of the bay bottom, and this bill will help us achieve that. And number two, it authorizes UMCs to collaborate with other leading research organizations, including the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, CERC, the Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences, VIMS, as well as other state and federal agencies and the industry itself to conduct this research. It also ensures that DNR creates and submits a report on substrate needs and repletion activities over the next 10 years. Lastly, we've talked about shell, we've talked about mapping, let's talk about spat. And I know this committee knows, but for the people at home, spat, think about it as a baby oyster. Okay, so we want to increase the amount of spat and spat-on-shell production in Maryland, and to do that, the bill does a number of things. It expands the current oyster hatchery efforts in the state by providing a $20 million capital fund to UMCs, again, University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, to create a second oyster hatchery. They have an incredibly successful hatchery at Horn Point over on the shore. This would allow them to double that effort. And an investment as well to Morgan State's Pearl Laboratory to expand spat production. The bill also has intent language that we as a General Assembly would love to see. It's our intention, 5 billion spat on shell produced by 2025. So we're increasing the abundance of spat. Now, I want to take a moment and thank particularly my co-sponsors on this bill, Senator Eckert, Senator Hershey, Senator Bailey, and Senator Gazzoni. This has really been a team effort. And we actually started our morning together at 7:30 working through amendments on this bill. After input from those sponsors, as well as input from the watermen, the industry, input from aquaculture community, and input from the restoration community, I have what I believe are a very good set of amendments. And it's also attached to my testimony, that will make a number of kind of nips and tucks to the bill to make sure that we are staying balanced and we're staying centered on this investment. Some of those amendments that you will see before you are going to be on the shucking house investment piece to clarify the definition of repletion, to remove the term grants, it's our intention that these are loans, include historic oyster shucking house facilities, create a nuanced loan forgiveness structure. We have some entrepreneurs who are interested in a larger production with 15 employees, and we have some entrepreneurs who are interested in a smaller production with maybe 4 employees. We want to make sure Marbidco has the flexibility to provide loans of different sizes to fit the right need. Next amendment on the shell recycling grant, remove the tiered approach. We got a little too into the weeds on that one in the bill, and make it clear that we want to structure it as $5 a bushel or market value, depending on which is higher, for up to $2,000 instead of the tiers that you see in the bill, and ensure that DNR can contract out the program. It was not our intention that DNR started to own shell recycling. We have wonderful groups that are doing that already, just that DNR certifies those recycling programs. On the bay bottom survey, we want to clarify that a goal is to map existing and potential oyster habitat, and an amendment will also remove the fish spawning area limitation. We would like to add aquaculture to the report required by DNR. We'd like to add language to clarify that the collaborative research on substrate should be conducted in a controlled study within an existing oyster restoration site. We do not want to take working bottom away. We want to do this study when it is on the ground in one of those restoration sites. We want to remove language regarding larger stones and instead use stones of various sizes. In that collaborative research section, just this morning, we received feedback that folks would like to see greater investment in the Eastern Bay for both repletion and restoration. We're adding language to study the differences in setting times. When we're setting the spat in a tank to attach to shell, we want to see if a longer setting time will lead to higher rates of survivability. All of this to say, of course, we all wish there were 25 hours in the day and more days in the week to create the perfect bill. We are not there yet, but again, we were working together early this morning. The stakeholders behind me, they may not agree with me as they come up, but I've committed to them and I commit to this committee that we will, until the last day, until you vote, work through consensus amendments to make sure that we bring to you a bill that reflects the critical balance of the interests while also focused on our goal, which is that greater investment in the natural resource of oysters will be a rising tide that lifts all boats, pun intended. We are again bringing these stakeholders together on Thursday morning to work through even more amendments that we hear today, and I plan on bringing the finalized package of amendments to this committee by the end of the week. With that, Madam Chair, somehow I've gotten to work on oysters over the last 4 years and have learned quite a lot. But I can tell this committee that the goal of this bill is how do we make a once-in-a-generation investment into the Eastern oyster, and I believe through the various mechanisms here, working in collaboration, this General Assembly has the opportunity to do just that. And I ask for a favorable committee report with the amendments we will present. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Elfreth, and as you know, the chair and I are punsters, so all boats rising pun. You were talking about getting into the weeds, and I was going to correct you and say into the seagrasses or something, so yes. Your first witness, we're delighted to welcome back Ann Swanson, Chesapeake Bay Commission.
Thank you, Vice Chair Kagan and committee members. For the record, my name is Ann Swanson. I serve as the Executive Director of the Chesapeake Bay Commission. The commission was created 41 years ago by the General Assemblies of Maryland, Virginia, and Pennsylvania. We work on bay policy across the watershed, both at the state and federal level. Allow me to add that this year we're honored in that Senator Elfreth not only serves as the Maryland delegation chair, but also the chair of the entire commission. Rounding out the Maryland delegation is Senator Gazzoni, Delegates Stein, Love, and Bridges, Jeannie Hadaway-Riccio, and retired Senator Mac Middleton are all members of the Maryland Commission. So now the subject at hand. Please allow me to provide a little bit of context and, more importantly, the big picture rationale behind SB 830. It is a very important step in this quest for both ecological and economic value of one of Maryland's truly iconic species. I have personally represented the Bay Commission on the Oyster Advisory Commission, known as the OAC, over the past 2 years. And as I look at the content of 830, I have to reflect on the original negotiated vision of the OAC. And that was number one, to increase the abundance and habitat of Maryland Chesapeake Bay oysters. Number two, to rely on science and stakeholder knowledge. And number three, to have a shared stewardship, supporting in harvest areas, aquaculture, and in the sanctuaries. When I look at this bill, I think that could be the preamble to this bill. And quite frankly, the OAC process has been one of the slowest, most tedious experiences that I have had in my 40-year career on Chesapeake Bay. It has been very, very painful. That being said, if this bill is bringing folks in support, it is a remarkable accomplishment. Despite the management options analyzed and the votes that were taken, 75% did agree that oyster restoration and fisheries could occur in Eastern Bay and the Chester River. And I want to stop here and applaud the governor for including $1 million in the FY23 budget for this purpose. In addition to this one modeled recommendation, the final report had several others. And I'd like to take my time to walk through those and show you how this bill complements them. First, the report recognized the need for clean shell and substrate to support enhancement of all sectors that were identified. SB 830 creates a requirement for our scientific institutions and stakeholders to assess the types of substrate that can be used along with their associated benefits. It requires DNR to develop a specific plan for substrate needs, and it provides enhanced capacity to put viable spat on shell through the expansion of the UMC's Horn Point facility and Morgan State. The second thing the OAC identified was the need to improve processor capabilities and techniques. The innovative Marbidco approach does that. It also, with current shell tax credit program expiring, as Senator Elfreth spoke to, this creates a new path with a grant program that will even allow smaller operations to participate. And lastly, the OAC recommended a comprehensive bay bottom survey because the current information is woefully inadequate and outdated. This would, of course, bring us up to date. So, the CBC, the Chesapeake Bay Commission, supports this bill with the amendments that Senator Elfreth has referenced. We believe that those amendments will enhance the Marbidco program and also simplify the shell recycling program. In summary, what I would say is this bill will do more for oysters than many initiatives have done in a long time. It is comprehensive and strategic, and we support this piece of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swanson, and thank you for letting us know the high-power folks who are on the commission. That's super impressive, and congratulations, Senator Elfreth, for your leadership role. Dave Namazi, and we'll continue down this panel, and then we have other witnesses as well.
Sure.
Mr. Namazi.
Thank you. My name is Dave Namazi, and I'm with the University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, known as UMCES. Chairman Pinsky and members of the committee, I thank you for allowing me to provide this testimony in support of SB 830. UMCES's oyster cultivation facility at Horn Point is a focal point for oyster restoration and research in the region. Researchers are working cooperatively with many other organizations to continue to improve production methods and learn more about how best to return our once abundant oyster resource to the Chesapeake Bay. Over the years, we've produced billions and billions of oyster spat on shell, which have been put in many natural areas, including sanctuaries and other bars. In partnership with DNR, UMC scientists have led the development of an oyster stock assessment. Additionally, we have a seat on the Oyster Advisory Commission referenced by Ann Swanson, which recently developed a series of consensus-based recommendations for enhancing oyster populations. As a key partner in oyster restoration, UMC supports this bill and has the expertise to assist in achieving its many goals, such as building a facility to produce additional spat, identifying and enhancing shell availability, assessing suitable substrate for restoration, and undertaking a survey of current and potential oyster bottom. UMC stands ready to assist the state of Maryland in enhancing oyster populations and therefore I request a favorable report of SB 830. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Namazi, and now my friend Paul Shurik. Welcome to Annapolis.
Nice to be here. Thank you. Chairman Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committee, my name is Paul Shurik. I'm with the Oyster Recovery Partnership. We are an Annapolis-based nonprofit organization. I thank you for your interest and your time this afternoon. I want to thank Senator Elfreth for her interest in leadership and pulling together a very diverse group of interest groups that has resulted in the draft and the amendments that are before you now. My role today is to address one element of this bill, and that is shell recycling. Oyster shell is a significant natural resource. We, the Oyster Recovery Partnership, currently operate a regional shell recycling program where we are picking shell up from several hundred restaurants on a weekly basis. That shell is cleaned and aged before being returned to the Chesapeake Bay for the purpose of oyster growth, whether it's restoration or the public fishery, and aquaculture as well. We support the Senator's amendments to convert the current draft had, as she mentioned, a tiered approach. We support the amended version, which would make this a simple flat rate of a grant and also raise the cap on the current. The current tax credit has a cap of $1,500 per entity or 300 bushels per year. This would raise the cap to $2,000 per entity or 400 bushels per year. We urge the committee to approve a favorable report with that amendment. Thank you.
I said my good friend Paul Pinsky, so I just made you a senator here. We have many other witnesses, so if you all wouldn't mind stepping aside, we'll wait until we hear from all of the proponents and then see if there are questions. So thank you for that. If Scott Nockey, Bruce Bariano, and Jesse Iliff could come up as the next three on the panel. You'll each have up to 2.5 minutes, and you do not need to use all that time. And as the chair often says, please be additive and not, and that we like me too as testimony as well.
Sorry.
So let's just take you down the row. Mr. Bariano, if you want to kick it off.
Let them go first.
Let them go first.
Thank you.
Okay, please.
Okay, Chairman Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, and members of the committee. My name is Scott Kanaki, and I'm the director of the Morgan State University Patuxent Environmental and Aquatic Research Laboratory, also known as the Morgan Pearl. I am here to strongly support Senate Bill 830, which would increase Maryland's production of oysters. Oysters are critical to the health of the Chesapeake Bay and the well-being of coastal communities and economies. As most of us know, oysters are wonderful filter feeders, reducing excess nutrients. Oysters provide habitat for fish and blue crabs, which can benefit commercial watermen and recreational fishers. The sustainable harvest of oysters through well-managed aquaculture in the public fishery benefits Maryland seafood consumers, supports small businesses, helps to maintain the culture and heritage of Maryland's seafood industry, and generates regional economic impacts to coastal communities and economies. I support this bill because it provides important investments that will help address constraints relating to substrate, processing facilities, and production. I am especially supportive of the appropriation for the Morgan Pearl to be used for needed infrastructure upgrades. This investment will enhance the ability of Morgan students, faculty, and researchers to contribute to oyster research and restoration. Further, this investment in the Morgan Pearl is synergistic with a new Morgan undergraduate degree in coastal science and policy and a rapidly growing PhD program in bioenvironmental science. There is a well-recognized need to diversify the marine sciences. And this is a discipline that lacks diversity even when compared to other STEM fields. Thus, this investment will have the dual function of increasing oyster production and furthering diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice objectives. Thank you once again for the opportunity to voice my support for Senate Bill 830.
Mr. Iliff.
Thank you, Chair Pinsky, Vice Chair Kagan, members of the committee. My name is Jesse Iliff. I'm Executive Director of the Severn River Association, the nation's oldest watershed group here, and strong support for Senate Bill 830 for three principal reasons. The first is that it will deliver a bigger pie for all of the stakeholders that use oyster spat on shell in their restoration, their aquacultural needs, or to replenish the wild fishery. It will deliver better data that allow more informed, more strategic, and targeted management decisions by the Department of Natural Resources, by the Army Corps of Engineers, and by all the other stakeholders in the Bay. And then finally, it delivers clearer plans for what we do with the oysters that are there and what we do with the oysters that we envision coming from this legislation. In the Severn and throughout the Bay in the past few years, there have been shortages of spat on shell, specifically due to heavy rainfall in 2018 and also through the COVID pandemic. And this is the sort of insurance policy legislation that would help us avoid the things that have canceled participation in very wonderful programs like the Marylanders Grow Oysters program and other efforts to restore the oyster fishery. The Bay Bottom Survey, as Senator Elfreth mentioned, is 3 to 4 decades old, and anybody reflecting on the impacts to the Bay and its watershed in that time frame can easily understand how important it is to have better data about what kind of bottom is out there suitable for replenishing the oyster population. And the Community Association Grant Program, we feel, will help to broaden the audience of people to learn about the oyster resource and help all Marylanders understand how important it is for our economy in the Bay. And for those reasons, we're here in strong support and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Mr. Bariano.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and Mr. Chairman. For the record, Bruce Bariano. I'm here on behalf of my client, Doug Leggum. It was a developer in Montgomery County who grew up on the Severn River, has been a member of the Severn, really a member of the Oyster Advisory Commission for 12 years, and is a very strong supporter of the development and the protection of oysters. Really commend the sponsor of the bill. This is a very important, significant bill, bringing a lot of stakeholders together that some people that never would even think would be at the table together. And that just shows how important and significant the bill is. I won't repeat what everyone else has said, but this bill will also extricate us from a dependency on Virginia in terms of shucking houses and getting shells. And there's so much merit to this bill. Would urge a favorable report. And again, thank the sponsor of the bill for introducing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bariano. And again, I'm going to ask the three of you all to defer to the next batch, and then we'll take any questions for the whole panel, all the proponents. We have favorable with amendments. If Mr. Brown, there you are, Robert T. Brown from the Watermen's Association, James Mullen from the Oystermen Association, and Rachel Dean. If that's then could be our next panel, and then we'll have one more panel, and then that will conclude the proponents. Mr. Brown, go ahead, you may begin.
My name is Robert T. Brown, President of the Maryland Watermen Association, Chair, Vice Chair, members of this committee. This is it's been a very trying year for us through this OAC we had to go through and all the pandemic and not being able to have sit-down meetings and all that. And we would like to have had more time to work things out a little better than what we had. However, with this bill, it has a lot of good stuff into it for our seafood industry, for the oyster as a whole. I'm having a little problem with having another meeting after the hearing here today. And I believe it is possibly, I just don't understand how politics works exactly. And you know, I'm a little fearful of what may come out of another amendment. However, with all the work that's been done into it and stuff, I'm having trouble with giving a decision on this. However, the way it is now, favorable with the amendments. However, if something comes up real bad in the meeting on Thursday morning before it goes to the delegates, it may be a different decision. But as we're still in the work of progress. Thank you.
Thank you. So If something comes up on Thursday, I know that Senator Elfreth will want to hear from you, and this committee will not be voting on this bill prior to then. So please make sure you communicate any updated information that the committee should have before we consider.
I just want to be clear on that in my testimony. Thank you.
You were clear. Thank you for the caveat. Mr. Mullen?
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair and members of the committee. I'm Jim Mullen with the Maryland Oystermen's Association, and we're supporting the bill with amendments. We agree with the spirit of the bill, but as we've heard, it's kind of still a work in progress. So want to be optimistic and positive down the stretch to the finish line. Do share a little bit of concern that what we presently have, nothing affects the industry in it. Senator Elfreth was kind enough to work with us on that and gave us a seat at the table, which we were very appreciative of. And as a member of the OAC, you know, we kind of sat around the big table and worked kind of like you guys. And so we're cautiously optimistic. So that's where we're at right now. But I think that we can get there. Thank you.
Ms. Dean.
Thank you. My name is Rachel Dean. I own Patuxent River Seafood with my husband down in Calvert County. It is with hopeful hesitation that I support this bill with amendments. There's been a couple surprises along the way, and I voiced those concerns. I think that they've been heard along the way, and I really appreciate that. But I share the same concerns as a member of the Oyster Advisory Commission, that we're kind of worried that anything that may come up in the future, it's such a big bill that we don't know how it might affect us. And being able to see into the future how the large investments in other areas of our fishery might affect our fishery and our ability to retain shell in the fishery scares me. I'm going to continue to ask that this bill acknowledges the need for shell to be returned naked to the bottom. Not all of us need the spat-on shell, and I know a lot of the shell will be turned to the hatcheries. I also want to make sure that the bill focuses on the shell staying in the state of Maryland. That's been something that we've asked for. I want to just ask again that although we are here in favor of the bill, that we may return to you with greater concerns depending on the turn that it takes. But I do want to help. I do want to thank everybody that has reached across the table on this one because, as you all know, oysters are a big deal, and they're certainly a big deal to me and my family as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. It's really important to hear from business people and leaders like you, so thank you for coming up from Calvert County. We appreciate your testimony. The last panel, Allison Colden, Julia Howes, and Herman Harrison. If you all could come up, and then committee members, we can ask questions of any of the witnesses. Calling again, Allison Colden, Julia Howes, Herman Harrison. Okay, you get it all to yourself.
All righty then.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Dr. Allison Coldham, Maryland Senior Fisheries Scientist with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, here to support House Bill 830 with amendments. Oyster shell, spat, and substrate are key building blocks for oyster restoration, aquaculture, and the public fishery throughout the state of Maryland. Without these inputs, oyster activities across the state would grind to a halt. This bill aims to increase the production of these inputs and builds upon the recommendations of the Oyster Advisory Commission, which included developing cost-effective strategies for identifying and obtaining sources of shell and substrate and providing economic incentives to retaining shell in the state and to reuse it. For far too long, oyster shells have been treated as a waste product. Over the centuries, shell has been used to pave roads, build homes, or worse, sent to landfills. This bill includes loans to increase shucking house capacity and increase shell recycling efforts, in which shell from seafood processors and restaurants are reclaimed and reused in oyster restoration. The bill also expands shell recycling incentives to small community organizations who may not have been able to participate in shell recycling in the past. It includes important surveying work. The last comprehensive oyster habitat survey was in the 1970s and 80s, and as mentioned previously, much of Maryland's oyster management still relies on surveys from 1906. This bill would make investments in a bay bottom survey that would identify the extent of existing habitat and help identify additional areas suitable for oyster restoration. Lastly, the bill would make critical investments to increase oyster hatchery capacity, an important bottleneck for oysters. CBF supports amendments to SB 830, which would clarify the use of shell from the Marbidco loan program, conform the loan forgiveness rate and shell recycling grant rates to current law and current programs, simplify the shell recycling grant program, and clarify the intent of the Bay Bottom Survey. We've included such amendments in our written testimony for your review. We welcome the opportunity to work with the committee, the bill sponsors, and other stakeholders on perfecting amendments to 830 to maximize the benefits to Maryland's oyster habitat and resource. Thank you.
Golden. And to be clear, the other two witnesses I called were unfavorable, so if they show up after any questions, then we can see if they want to testify unfavorable. But this would, now questions for any of the proponents and for Senator Elfreth, starting with the chairman.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. A question for Mr. Namazi and a question or a comment from Ms. Dean. So, Ms. Dean, if you can come up too. This bill has a little bit of a price tag. One of the big things is $20 million for new hatchery, and I would love to have a new hatchery at UMC's. I guess my question is, has the university put in, separate from this bill, for a capital project directly to budget and tax or to the governor?
At this point, we have not, sir, and we have considered that. We have put in and made a request for significant facilities enhancement funding, and have put that through budget and tax.
And again, not to push too far, Dave, I mean, I'd like to help the university, as you know, as much as we can. Is this the second hatchery? Is that in a top tier of priorities for your capital expansion at the university? Again, I don't want to put you on the spot, but, you know, we're in a situation here, it's unclear the tail wagging the dog. It's a very expensive bill. And again, I think most of it, all of it, I think we agree with. Some comes at a lower cost than others. And I'm just trying to figure out how to frame the conversation with the budget committee upstairs.
So one of the challenges, first of all, we have a lot of facility challenges. Obviously, all universities do, a lot of state agencies do too. So I don't want to minimize that point. But I would also say that you know, we see our role as a service to the state in terms of putting spat on shell, and we like to work with our partners in this, with particularly DNR and others in putting more spat on shell. If there is a request to be putting a lot more spat on shell, we are going to need additional facilities. If the state does not want to necessarily go in that direction, then our facilities may be suitable. So this is kind of, I don't want to say it's a tail wagging the dog, it's a policy decision that, if it's made, requires more facilities.
Thank you for that honesty. And secondly, I'm not sure it's a question or a comment. Let me point out, Ms. Dean, besides being involved with oysters and the seafood harvesting, is also a teacher by day. And an outstanding teacher, by the way, with a number of degrees. So she is working 2 or 3 jobs, as it were, also doing their heritage tours in Southern Maryland, and she served on the Title Advisory Commission for some years. So I just want to thank you and your husband for your work, and we've spoken on the phone a number of times, so thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much for everything you guys are doing for our industry.
Irony, because when you sign up to testify, people put their affiliation, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, Watermen's Association, whatever, and you were the only person testifying today on this bill that had a blank spot. So I guess it's because you have too many things on there that it would have exploded the box, the little box of information. So I second the chair's gratitude to you. So thank you.
Thank you. I never know which hat might help our cause.
There you go. Perfect. Senator Riley.
Much. Madam Vice Chair, Marbidco, Maryland Agricultural Resource-Based
Industry Development Corporation, a go-to source for rural business development financing assistance. So financing, please. Me too. Question for either of you. I've been in the state Senate 13 years. The very first year I was here, they talked about dermo. Could you share with the committee, who may not be familiar with that term, what is it and how is it affecting our oysters today?
I've got great news. It's not. So I'll start there. We have had disease reports in the past year. We have just about zero prevalence of disease in the bay, and our oyster fishery is thriving. So, you know, I'm so frustrated to hear repeatedly that oysters are at 1% of historic levels. I want you guys here in Annapolis to know that we have a thriving industry. My family has gone from 1 boat to 3. We have 5 guys working for us. I wanted to testify over about the Marbidco loan because I wanted to give those guys the opportunity that we didn't have to have support. So there is a lot of up and coming, and you hear about the age of watermen. We're younger than you think we are. But dermo is not affecting us right now, and that is great for the oysters because what it means is that our natural spat fall is really doing what it's supposed to be doing, and it's supporting an industry that is viable. I believe it's sustainable, and I hope that we can continue on that trajectory.
Thank you. You're the expert. MSX.
Same thing, we're not seeing it. And, you know, it has a lot to do with the salinity. It has a lot to do with the freshettes that we see. We haven't been fighting that in recent years. So both dermo and MSX, which is a disease that cannot be spread by eating oysters, so please know that. Oysters are certainly safe to eat, but we're not seeing that. So that isn't a challenge that we're facing right now, and I think that more than anything, that was what was affecting our industry, more so than what we hear so often, which is over-harvesting. Disease decimated not only the public fishery, but also aquaculture in the state of Maryland historically.
Thank you. Young man, I've been to Horn Point several times, and it was my impression that most of the spat on shell is non-reproducing. Is that accurate?
No, that's not accurate. When we put spat on, when there's a spat on shell and we put it out in the wild, it is completely able to produce,
More
viable.
Spat. More spat.
I'm sorry?
It's able to produce more spat.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you know, in some sense, you look at some of the thriving sanctuaries in the state. Those are producing larvae that are being spread throughout the waterways.
Is this a recent change?
No, it's there. Just to be clear, there are some organizations that can produce genetically modified, if you will, oysters that have extra chromosomes that do not reproduce. We at Horn Point no longer produce those.
No longer. You used to.
We used to. Yes.
I'm an old guy. I probably had the old version.
Yep.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Looking to see whether anyone else has any other questions. Senator Ellis does. And then Senator Carosa, and then we'll wrap up this bill.
Yeah.
Senator Ellis.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I have questions for the first panel. Just a couple questions. Appreciate this bill and the price tag that it brings. And I represent Charles County, most of Charles County. In Charles County, we have the Potomac River that goes way around, you know, the shape. And then it goes straight up into Prince George's County. And as most people know, the Potomac River is owned by Maryland shore to shore. And then we have a tremendous amount of tributaries that dump into the Potomac River, like Mattawoman Creek, which is one of the most productive estuaries there is for several species. Then you have the Nansemore Creek. I could go on all the way up into Fort Washington, up by Oxon Hill, up straight up. And so a lot of my constituents share a concern that the foundation and is not active in that part of the state in doing things to help the Potomac River, Patuxent River, or the productive creeks we have. So my question is, how would you answer that concern about the involvement of this entire activity and spending of funds in that part? Let's call it the Potomac River corridor of Maryland.
Senator, I understand why we hate puns in this committee, because I think you're asking about CBF, the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. Are you asking about
No, I'm just asking generally about
Generally speaking?
oysters and going and planting these spats in Potomac River and in Nanjeboy Creek and Madwoman Creek, all in the Potomac River corridor.
So,
and generally beyond that, your activities in that region.
So I can speak broader in that the Chesapeake Bay Commission, as I explained earlier, we're actually made up of 3 states, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and Virginia. So number one, when it comes to the Potomac, we work very, very closely with not only the Potomac River Fisheries Commission, which manages fisheries in the Potomac, but then also with Virginia. And Virginia, the VIMS laboratory, the Virginia Marine Resources Commission's laboratory, the Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences laboratory, also has a big production and research facility. And so part of their focus has been working in the Patuxent. So in that sense, we've worked in both spaces. We also work all the time with constituencies at the county level, for example, in the states to improve resource management in those areas, whether it's stormwater, whether it's agricultural practices, whether it's fisheries management. So by no means is the Potomac a forgotten river. The other thing to remember, which is amazing, is that, of course, the Potomac is originating in Pennsylvania. And so there, what we do all the time also is work with our Pennsylvania counterparts to make sure that the best management practices are being deployed upstream.
Right.
So I don't know if that
Thank you.
helps.
Yeah, I hear your answer, and that answer is part of the problem, because I hear Virginia and I hear Pennsylvania. I don't hear so much Maryland, what Maryland is doing, and in that corridor. And I think what folks have said to me is we have subcontracted out our responsibility to Virginia when it comes to Maryland, spend Maryland resources in the Potomac River corridor and all its tributaries. And so that's my concern, and I hear what you answered about Virginia and Pennsylvania, but I didn't hear Maryland, what Maryland is doing in a substantive way in the Potomac River sections of the state. And so that's my concern.
Okay. Senator, I think this might be a question best suited for the Department of Natural Resources, who we've worked with on this bill, but the Secretary's not here. So I just like you can speak to Potomac, I can speak to my four rivers in my district very well, but I can't speak to the Potomac. I think the beauty of this bill is it's not picking winners and losers. It's saying we're increasing the supply of spat, shell, and our understanding of the bay bottom across the bay. So there's no, besides the Eastern Bay, which was specifically identified by the OAC consensus process as kind of a target area, besides that call out, the benefits of this bill are driven and written to benefit every corner of the bay, including the Potomac.
Right, understand.
But I can ask the Secretary to follow up with you, and I hear your concerns that maybe we need some more focus and some more concentration on the Potomac.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. And my second part is connected to that first. My second question is, you know, as far as what I've seen is there's very little diversity in the conservation community. Mm-hmm. And I look at all the witnesses came up here to testify, and not one person that looks like me. Yeah. And so this ties into this. In that part, Potomac corridor, is you have a large concentration of African Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans, and we are not at the table. And so I'm concerned about that. So my question is, what are you doing to involve this large section of taxpayers in Maryland? And I must say, we are part of the problem, therefore we have to be part of the solution.
Absolutely.
Even this bill, there are no African American senators sponsoring this bill. And the question is, why I would sign up if I was asked to sponsor this bill. So why are we, and I'll personalize it, being left out of being part of the solution? What we see here is unacceptable. So are you working on that? Anyone can answer that?
Senator,
To
I
bring
hear you.
diversity and equity and inclusion in this particular expensive, very expensive project we're on to save the bay and its tributaries.
First of all, I apologize that I did not approach you about co-sponsorship. I would love if you wanted to add your name via amendment. I would welcome that. To your point, that's expressly why we included Morgan State University's Pearl Laboratory in the bill. And you heard the director of that laboratory speak about Morgan State just started a new degree program focused on coastal conservation. So this is very much about training the next generation of scientists. And through the Pearl Laboratory, and I know Dave can speak to the young scientists coming out of UMCs, I know they are very focused on diversity as well. But that's expressly why we didn't want to leave Pearl out. I hear you about this table. I can also say, you know, it's not a particularly anymore. It used to be a very diverse industry. Unfortunately, it's not as diverse as it used to be. I appreciate your concerns, and we are trying to address that, again, through UMCs, through Pearl, and through the support for small businesses and those shucking houses.
Yeah, and also, well, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Senator.
Thank
you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ellis and now Senator Carosa.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. My questions are directed to the folks representing the watermen, so Mr. Brown, and those who work with Ms. Dean. And I don't know if there's a representative from the Delmarva Fisheries Association here or not. So I'm approaching this on the fact that I represent the watermen in my district. And I'm feeling very unsettled, similar to my colleague Senator Ellis's comments, that feeling left out. Because I don't know, I have not had the opportunity to talk to my watermen on the lower shore to really understand how this SB 830 would benefit that community, especially as you all have testified. It's been a hard couple years with the pandemic. You were hard hit with what happened in 2019 with the sanctuaries when we tried to get some amendments there to help the watermen. We're trying to build out, this looks like a bill that comes along that could potentially help the watermen. But given your very hesitant testimony, I'm not convinced. So I'd like to know, I guess I'll start with Mr. Brown, when you were first pulled into the process on this bill and the impact working with the watermen, and also ask each one of you, if it's hesitant support, what would it take? So I know that in my local area, and I will talk directly to them, that this bill actually will put them in a better place than they were going back to 2019.
Yes, some of the problems we had into it have been taken out, like it had the spawning grounds, a different fish into it, which has nothing to do with, oyster harvest or oyster fishery. We also had, one of the things was it had where the department had the right to say, when it came to the shell, whether it could be replantation or restoration or sanctuaries, and we didn't want or into it, we wanted it and. We wanted everybody to be into it together, and that's pretty much been corrected. This bill was brought up very quickly on us, right at the end.
I'm concerned about that.
Before it was to be delivered. And we've worked through most of these problems. However, the bill, it's changed even this morning. It changed the whole number. It changed from where the way I understand it, it changed from where the people who would get in the grant or the loan for the oyster houses had to have 15 people hired. Well, was it 15 people for a whole year? Was it 15 people for just a season? But they have taken the 15 off of that so that everybody can get into it to help start with an oyster shucking house, which we need. We all need to keep all the oyster shells into the state of Maryland we can. We're just very cautious about this because I'm just not completely comfortable with it, especially having a meeting on more amendments Thursday morning. And here we are testifying here today. That's one of my biggest concerns I got now. What's going to come up between now and then?
Mr. Brown, just to interject for a moment, and I know we might hear from others as well. The legislative process is long and complicated and can be contentious, but the fact that things keep changing shows Senator Elfreth's engagement and eagerness to try to accommodate all interested parties. And so that's what I'm hearing, and I just want to make sure that that's what you understand it to be also. So this is not done yet. She's made clear. I think the committee is clear on that, and we don't know what the final product is going to be or what her final recommendation is going to be, but this is a conversation, and that's what hearings allow us to do. Senator Carosa, did you have another brief question so we can move on?
I wanted to give Ms. Dean the opportunity,
Please.
because I was also trying to
Please, Ms.
probe.
Dean, go ahead.
I wanted to probe when you were first consulted about this major legislation that the chair has
Yeah,
already
so-
pointed out as
okay.
well.
So, Ms. Dean, if you can do the substance, because the process, I was just looking at the legislative request number, and it's frankly pretty high. So Senator Elfreth clearly was doing her homework. The legislative request number was 2,868, and that was like as high as the bill was. When she dropped the bill, Senate Bill 830, we've been also, she had a bill, I think, in the single or double digits. So, you know, waiting a while. So that's what the process is.
I
So please, Ms. Dean,
understand.
go ahead.
I understand. And to briefly answer that question, it was cross-filed over in the House, and to put it simply, I came at Delegate Crosby with both barrels. And that was because I was so worried that this bill might not have what we needed in it. And I had to get over myself, basically. Even though I served on the OAC and I felt like maybe I hadn't been as involved as I would have liked to have been, I had to get over myself. But I want to answer the question about your constituents specifically. I think there's two things that maybe the lower shore would really like to see in this bill. One of it being that shell is returned to them. Any shell that comes off of the public fishery goes into a shucking house. No shell comes off of the sanctuaries that goes into a shucking house. So I think your constituents would be very interested in making sure that shell, whether it's spat-on shell or naked shell, goes back onto the bottom so that they can see this fishery continue. I think the second thing is those shucking houses. I would personally like to see a little bit more incentive. It was at $35, dropped down to $5, and some of the shucking houses over on the shore, I think, would benefit from a larger incentive, because really what this industry needs is that shell retained in the state of Maryland instead of going outside of Maryland.
Thank you. And I have one last question for the bill sponsor.
Want to come back up?
Musical chairs.
There you go.
I think why you're seeing us so unsettled is that I truly have, no idea if my lower shore watermen have even been consulted. And what I'm hearing is, probably not. And so I was going to ask you with the Delmarva Fisheries Association, when you first started to work with them on this bill.
Well, let me be clear about all of our time commitments. I can't meet with every single person that this bill affects as much as I wish I could. That's not possible. I reached out via Senators Hershey and Eckerd, and Secretary Hadaway-Riccio asked us all to sit down with Captain Newberry and Chip McLeod a little over a month ago when the bill, probably mid-January, we sat down for breakfast. We had a very productive conversation. I've been in constant contact with Delmarva Fishery since then. Captain Newberry and I were on the phone at about 9 o'clock last night, working through some of their concerns. This committee knows sausage making, the legislative process is not pretty, but I appreciate the discomfort all around. This is an important issue. I'm not sure if there's a more important fisheries issue this committee or this General Assembly can deal with than oysters. But again, I'm committed to working with all stakeholders. Is everybody going to be happy? And at the end of the day, probably not. Are there going to be dartboards with my face somewhere in the state? Probably yes.
Senator Elfreth, I think I'd like to cut this off because frankly, we're not here to debate process. I think everybody who knows you knows that you work your bills really hard. And even if there's an interest group right now that hasn't heard about the bill, they know about the bill now. So it is incumbent upon them to be in touch with Senator Elfreth, and the fact that there is a bipartisan group of sponsors and that represent different parts of the Bay Area and stuff, I think that's really important. So that completes the hearing on Senate Bill 830, and we really want to thank all of the witnesses. We hear your concerns, and we are grateful for your presence here today. Handing it back to the chairman.
Okay, it appears we're going into Senator Bailey Day. Senator Bailey, please join us, starting with Senate Joint Resolution 06. We have Philip Zalesek and Thomas Lilly. You can bring them up. And then we have 3 or 4 more bills, so please. And Ian, get Sarah for a minute. Oh, she's there. Yeah, don't worry. No.
And do it, and do this for 1 minute. I have no idea why one of my witnesses just walked out.
They probably went to get a fish sandwich.
Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your patience. I'm glad to be here. Greetings to all. And Senator Bailey from District 29, representing St. Mary's, Southern Calvert County. Today we're going to talk about Senate Joint Resolution 6, which is Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, Atlantic Menhaden, the prohibiting the commercial reduction fishery. This joint resolution recommends that in order to maintain a sustainable Atlantic menhaden fishery, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission consider prohibiting the commercial reduction fishery of Atlantic menhaden, primarily the use of purse seines and spotter planes in the Chesapeake Bay. I'm going to talk just a little bit about history. Menhaden is the most important fish in the bay. It is the forage fish for all the predators. All the fish, the crabs, and the birds, such as the ospreys, rely on menhaden. Part of this, we talk about the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. I'm going to talk a little bit about brief history. As you all know, back before I came here, I was a natural resource police officer. And in the early 2000s, working in a covert capacity in that world, I saw a decline in striped bass numbers. I saw them decline to a level that had been pre-moratorium. As everyone knows, we had a moratorium on striped bass. So we went and met with the biologists, a group of us officers, seeking to tell them, look at the young of the year, we think we have a problem. We were discounted and said, there's no issue, this is a sustainable fishery. Well, we talked to some of our colleagues in Virginia, some of the feds, some of the people in North Carolina. They were all seeing the exact same thing we were seeing. So with the Department of Justice and the Fish and Wildlife Service, we started an undercover case involving striped bass. What happened? We had one of the largest prosecutions of striped bass and industry in the entire United States. We pointed out many problems, not just in the state of Maryland, but many problems up and down the East Coast with many other states. And because striped bass was a migratory species, it was handled by the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. So as a result of that, we tried to get the Maryland biologists to take a position on the regulations in other states. And they flat out refused. That's very important for you all to understand. When talking to many of them were my friends. They said, we don't want other states coming here and telling us how to manage our resources, so we're sure not going to go tell them how to manage theirs. We stay in our lane and they stay in theirs. Unwritten law. And that's the way it was. So we went to the Department of Justice. I personally sat with the prosecutors, and we got our way in to be able to go to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission and testify. And a group of us went to Maine, and that's exactly what we did. And as a result of telling our story, just a bunch of simple game wardens that were able to prove the facts and show what was happening, we changed the fishery for the entire East Coast. Every single state was required to follow the same regulations. That's a big part of what I'm going to talk about today. That's why it's so important, because I'm going to tell you, in the early 2000s, when I was looking at the Young of the Year Index, the Young of the Year Index right now, today, for the striped bass is worse than it's been in 50 years. It's critical. Back then, when I had this case, they said it was a sustainable fishery. Right now, the biologists in all the states say that it's not a sustainable fishery. They say it's overfished. So that is extremely important as I go on. This resolution requested would prohibit the large vessels owned by a foreign country from over-harvesting the bait fish that are vital to the future of our fish populations in the bay, as they have done in the past. And what I'm saying is, and I don't know that everybody understands this, but in Maryland, you can't do this. You can't take ocean-going commercial vessels and harvest menhaden using spotter planes and otter beam trawl nets 24 hours a day in the state of Maryland. You can't do it. We're the nursery, right? We're the nursery for all these fish. But if you go to the Virginia line, this happens. This is permitted in Virginia waters of the Chesapeake Bay. Reduction fishery in the bay is done by the Omega Fish Oil Company. That used to be a Virginia-based company. And I was told when I brought this resolution up last year, they said, you know, Omega's off limits. I said, why is Omega off limits? They said, because they employ people in Northumberland County, and nobody will go along because they have no businesses there. Well, Omega's still there, right? But the fact is, and they'll still be there, but the fact is, these people, this company that was bought for $500 million is operating in our bay, and what they put is a lot of things at risk. They are now a Canadian company. Never heard of such, that here a Canadian company that exports everything that comes out of the Chesapeake Bay that they catch, we're allowing this to happen. The only thing I'm asking is that we, as Maryland, ask Virginia and the Atlantic states to take a look at this, because it doesn't make common sense. One of my people that's going to talk after me is Phil Zilak, and what he is going to show you, he's got a PowerPoint that he's done and is available in his testimony, and it shows that Young of the Year and some of the other science that is so important with this. This reduction fishery currently has the ability to take 26% of the total Atlantic coast menhaden quota, and that's from Maine to Florida, inside the Chesapeake Bay. This poses a substantial threat to the amount of money and our economic impact. Now listen, the Southwick study, which I learned a great deal about when I was prosecuting that case on striped bass, yearly, striped bass on the East Coast produce $6.8 billion with a B. $6.8 billion come out of the economy of that. We are putting that all at risk right at the moment. We're talking about 68,000 jobs across the United States that are associated with that and what we're doing. The Chesapeake Bay is a nursery for the Atlantic coast striped bass and should be recognized as such. The reduction fishery in the Chesapeake Bay threatens the population of fish species like striped bass, trout, drum, shad, and bluefish, all of which have seen alarming trends in their populations. It is important to be aware that Maryland does not allow this type of reduction fishery, nor does Maryland allow a bycatch allowed with the reduction fishery in Virginia. Menhaden are harvested in this state to use as bait for other fish or crabs. Therefore, this resolution will not impact any of our Maryland watermen. It won't impact our sport fishermen. It won't impact our outdoorsmen. It will simply assist them. It is important that the General Assembly recognizes that the commercial watermen, the charter boat captains, and sport fishermen are on the same page, and we move forward with this resolution. I request a favorable report on this Senate Joint Resolution 6. Thank you for your consideration. I turn it over to my distinguished panel.
Yes, if, Mr. Chairman, if the committee members would call up the PDF file, which is the presentation, those are the exhibits, and I'm not going to repeat what the senator just said, but I want you to take a look at those exhibits. That's the science behind it. So before you start that clock, could you please take a look at and tee that up? It says PFZ presentation, and you can see with science what the senator is talking about. Does everybody have that up and take a look at it?
Unfortunately, we're going to need someone to run the computer from there, and one of our staff is out of the room at the moment. So if we want to go to the other speaker,
Let's do
come
that.
back to you.
Now, this is critical. You got to see the exhibit, sir.
We understand.
Can I take this off when I speak?
No.
Okay.
Just lean in the mic, we'll hear you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Tom Lilly. I'm from Whitehaven, Maryland, on the Eastern Shore, and I want to remind you that we are not asking from this resolution for you to make a decision on factory fishing. We're asking you to urge our Menhaden delegates to have the commission make that decision. They're the experts. That's where it needs to go. Right now, a foreign fishing company is catching most of our Menhaden in Virginia before it gets to Maryland. You have the opinions, and I hope you've looked at them, from 4 prominent scientists that this factory fishing needs to be reduced. Dr. Watts, Dr. Michael, academia. Dr. Watts is probably the premier osprey and raptor researcher in the United States. He's from William and Mary. He's been studying this for 40 years, and he understands and speaks to the unique relationship between Menhaden and our beautiful ospreys. And what he says is that our ospreys are dying out in the bay. The chicks are not getting enough of that vital Menhaden they need. Dr. Siri, whose report you have, Dr. Siri was the chief of the ASMFC ERP project, which took 5 years to complete. You'll see his report. He says that Menhaden fishing in the bay needs to be reduced along with striped bass conservation to preserve striped bass. Dr. Bressman is a professor at Salisbury State. You have the CBF press release, which shows you that the concentration of Menhaden in the diet of striped bass has dropped alarmingly from about 80% on down to about 8%. Now, just moving the fishing outside the bay without any further discussions or any further research, what would that do? That would save 5,000 metric tons of Menhaden for our
Sir, you're going to wrap up. Your 2 minutes are up, sir.
Okay, for our distressed wildlife. That's the primary thing here. Okay. Just moving that fishing offshore like every other state in the Atlantic does, but Virginia to protect their fishermen and protect their environment.
Thank you.
That's what that would accomplish. No more research necessary.
Thank you.
One step quick. Are there any questions?
No. I'll handle that, sir. We'll allow it at the appropriate time. Senator, 2 things. Normally, we allow the sponsor to do a PowerPoint if they have one, not the witnesses. And secondarily, we were never sent a PowerPoint anyway, so.
It was a PDF, sir. It was a PDF.
Well, if it wasn't sent to the committee council, and committee council or the assistant to the chair did not receive such testimony ahead of time, but normally, we have a limitation on hearings, and we allow the sponsor to do PowerPoints, but when we start to have all the witnesses do PowerPoints, it basically gets out of our control.
I'm completely clear.
Yep.
Understand this, Crystal.
But
His committee, his testimony that he presented to the committee is in the form of a PowerPoint. It's on their computers.
Okay.
That is all he was asking.
Okay.
Was that they brought it up on the computers. There was some,
Well,
there was some misconfusion, some
Okay.
confusion about it, right? That was all he was saying. They could bring it up. I don't know how that got, right.
Okay.
We're all good. He's ready to start.
Okay, so committee, on your bill hearing for this bill, SJ 0006, if you pull it up under witness testimony, you can pull the PowerPoint that the gentleman would like to refer to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You can start the clock now. Good afternoon. My name is Phil Zalzak. I'm here today to support Senate Joint Resolution 6. Next slide. I represent 10 Maryland recreational fishing organizations throughout the state, from the Potomac River to the Atlantic Ocean. Slide 3. Atlantic menhaden are an important forage fish for striped bass. Overharvesting of Atlantic menhaden by the industrial reduction fishery by omega protein is threatening the survival of striped bass and other predators in the Chesapeake Bay. Omega protein is the last remaining industrial reduction fishery on the Atlantic coast. The picture, this is again on slide 3, the picture at the bottom is a striped bass swallowing a menhaden. Slide 4. The recreational striped bass market represents $800 million in GDP to the state of Maryland and over 10,000 jobs. That's one fishery. All right, let's talk about science. If you look at slide 6, Chesapeake Bay contributes about 60% of the Atlantic stock of striped bass in the Atlantic Ocean. When this bay fish is threatened, it impacts the entire Atlantic coast. Slide 7. Since 2010, the recreational harvest has dropped 68%. 5.3 million to 1.73 million. You think we have a problem? Slide 8. The young of the year, fish less than a year old, are now at a 40 to 50 year low. Take a look at that slide. Look around 1980 that's when they declared a moratorium in the Chesapeake Bay. Slide 9. The Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission has determined there are not enough Atlantic menhaden along the Atlantic coast to adequately feed striped bass and other predators. They basically cut the percentage from 216,000 metric tons down to 194 metric tons. And they allow omega protein to take 51,000 metric tons out of the Virginia portion of the Chesapeake Bay. That's 26% of the total allowable catch for the entire Atlantic Ocean. Here's the other thing, and I'll be very brief. Based on 50 years of research at William & Mary, Dr. Brian Watts has concluded that there are not enough Atlantic menhaden in the main stem of the Chesapeake Bay to support the osprey population. Based on this economic and scientific basis, I'm fully supportive of this Senate Joint Resolution 6, along with the other 9 recreational fishing organizations in the state of Maryland. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir, and sorry for the miscommunication at the front end. Okay, committee questions. Senator Riley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Phil, you don't have to yell at us.
Okay, sorry.
Senator, I'm not a fisherman. I'm not a lawyer either, but that's beside the point. What amount of the adult rockfish diet actually comes from menhaden? Menhaden.
I'm going to refer to some of my experts.
All right, that's covered in the.
Very short answer.
Yes. It
A
was
percentage.
80%, 70%, it is now 8%.
Where are they getting the rest of their food?
They're they're not, most of them are not getting any food, and that's why they're malnourished and there's high mortality, according to the Chesapeake Bay Foundation. The thing is, Senator, that the large spawning stock of striped bass, we're talking about fish this size,
I've caught one.
they need the large menhaden to survive. And the reason they need a lot of menhaden, and because they need menhaden all the way up the bay to the Susquehanna Flats, a lot of it. That's where a lot of them spawn. The reason they need it is it's a very high energy need for spawning and for making that trip. They need those menhaden there. That's why they're failing. That's why our stock, striped bass
I got
spawning
you. I got
stock
my
has
answer.
failed.
I got my answer.
Right.
Senator, this omega protein, I presume they're using the menhaden to produce pills for people's consumption?
Animal feed.
It's primarily animal.
I'm sorry, I asked the senator.
Go ahead.
I'm going to refer to Paul, to,
Phil.
All right.
no.
A little softer, Phil.
Phil.
Okay.
Tom, a little softer.
Okay,
Short answer.
right.
Are they
The menhaden-
using this
the menhaden
fish?
are chopped up and the oil is extracted. It's used as a protein supplement in poultry
Talk into
feed.
the microphone, please.
It's used as an animal feed, basically. They also have nutritional things that are omega pills that they say you can take. But everything that comes out of this animal feed can be replaced by other products, such as soybeans. There are a lot of omega-3 rich grains. So every single thing that they use for menhaden can be produced by another industry.
Thank you very much, Tom. Senator, what is reduction fishing for us non-fishermen?
So that's what I,
Pull the microphone over.
that's what I was explaining to you. That's the commercial reduction fishery. That's not just fishing like we do in Maryland.
It's a technical question.
is.
Reduction. What does reduction mean?
It's industrial fishing. That's where you go out with a couple boats with seine and you encapsulate an entire pod of fish, and they're all gone. And generally what you'll see is the birds go away and all the
I understand the implication. I'm asking for a definition of a
Well, the
word
reduction,
on my sheet.
if I may, Senator?
No. One person, one answer.
I think it's industrial scale fishing is what
Okay.
it is.
Senator, can I ask you a question that you can answer?
Yes, I hope so.
Hold the microphone closer. This is a resolution. It has no force of law. Has other people in Maryland approached the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission with this request?
Yes,
And what's happened? Nothing.
that's correct.
So what is it, just one more time for the good of the team?
No, that's exactly why we are here. And if you were listening to the history that I explained to you about the biologists.
I listened, Senator.
Right, then that's exactly why we are here. That answers the question. The whole purpose is, this is incumbent upon the General Assembly to show everyone how important this is to the entire economic future coming from the Chesapeake Bay. And other people that have other agendas, this is very important. That's why a resolution is in order.
I understand, but Phil, you're done. Senator, they know our position, don't they?
I have no idea that another resolution has ever been done like this before.
Okay. All right, Senator, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief because I've been trying to just kind of bottom line it. As I understand right now, in Virginia, you have these big foreign companies, industrial, that are doing this fishing and depleting the menhaden, which they cannot do in Maryland because we don't allow it, but it has an impact on the Chesapeake Bay and all these other fisheries. So what you're asking is that we, which has been done on other issues with the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, I kind of learned that at the federal level, that what you're saying is we want to go on record and apply pressure with this commission to put pressure on for Virginia to basically reduce and stop their overfishing of menhaden because it affects us in Maryland, the Chesapeake Bay.
May I answer that,
I just
Senator?
want to make sure I'm understanding it.
Hold it, just tell us if her assessment is right or not. We don't need a long
It's
answer.
exactly correct.
Okay, thank you.
Well,
No, sir, thank you. The senator took care of it.
I really do want to understand, because then,
That's fine.
then I understand the value of putting the pressure on. Thank you.
Okay, further questions? Seeing none, this concludes the bill on SJ 0006. We'll go to the next bill, which is 455, Chesapeake Bay and Coastal Sports Fishing License and Recreation Fishing. We have Senator Bailey, who'll be followed by Jeffrey Farris, Robert Brown, Allison Colden, David Sikorsky. Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senator Bailey, District 29, St. Mary's and Calvert County. Today, Senate Bill 455, Chesapeake Bay and Coastal Sport Fishing License and Recreational Fishing Pilot Program and Task Force. This bill establishes a Chesapeake Bay and Coastal Sport Fishing License Pilot Program in the Department of Natural Resources. The purpose of this pilot program is to collect contact information and demographic data of individuals fishing under an annual special Chesapeake Bay and Coastal Sport Fishing License, and information regarding the number of trips taken, fish caught, and released under a Chesapeake Bay Sport and Coastal Sport Fishing License. The pilot program is intended to improve compliance with a provision that requires individuals who are currently allowed to fish without a Chesapeake Bay and Coastal Sport Fishing License within the Department of Natural Resources. Under this bill, a license holder must provide DNR the information requested in the pilot program to maintain eligibility to continue to get a fishing license. DNR is directed to track costs associated with the implementing the pilot program and annually report recommendations on expecting funding needed to grow and establish the program as a permanent program. This bill also creates a task force on recreational fishing data collection and licensing to develop a plan to improve recreational fishing data collection for fisheries management. Maryland is often penalized when it comes to fishing for its commercial and recreational because we don't have all the substantial data that we need. Currently, when it comes to recreational fishing, there is limited to no data, no information. Commercial fishermen can catch an 18-inch striped bass. If you go out and you're fishing with a recreational license and you're in the Patuxent River, you can catch a 19-inch striped bass. If you go to the Potomac River, you can catch a 20-inch striped bass, but you can catch two. So the situation is, depending on where you are, depending what is the status, because we don't have a lot of good data, the Atlantic States has done different things. Now, this committee, back in 2014, and then again in 2020, as a bill that I sponsored, we passed legislation which directed the Department of Natural Resources to study methods of obtaining more accurate harvest data for the recreational striped bass fishery, so we could get past this. These reports did not result in any substantial changes in how this information is collected. So this bill is the next step in obtaining the accurate data needed to properly estimate the number of fish, including the striped bass being caught in Maryland, to aid those who fish both commercial and recreational purposes for working towards a sustainable fishery for years to come. I respectfully request a favorable report on Senate Bill 455. Thanks for your consideration. Turn it over to my panel.
Mr. Brown.
Robert T. Brown, President of the Maryland Watermen Association, Chair and members of this committee. The commercial fishery industry is held to the highest standard of data control than any other one in, I guess, the whole United States. When we catch our rockfish, we have to tag them. Once they're tagged, they have to go to a check-in station where they are reweighed to get the weight off of them and the amount of fish you had. And then you have a card that says how many pounds you're permitted, and it's documented on there, the date, how you caught the fish, what kind of gear you used. It has the amount of quota that you're allowed, that's deducted from that, and the number of fish that you caught. So we're held at a very high standard. And it's a good standard because it gives us the most accurate data that we have to help protect our livelihoods and the fish itself. However, when it comes to the sports fishing industry, they use what they call, a lot of it is MRIF. And what that is, you'll get a phone call or they may meet you on the pier. How many fish did you catch today? Where did you fish at? And it's far from being something that you can complete science on. And the only thing that we're asking of is that the sports fishing industry have a way of collecting their data that we can get true science out of. Thank you very much.
Want to come up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, again, Dr. Allison Colden, Maryland Senior Fisheries Scientist with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation, here in support today of Senate Bill 455. Reliable and accurate data is absolutely critical to fisheries management. Recreational fisheries, by their sheer number of participants, can be very challenging for managers to obtain timely, accurate, and representative data across all fishery sectors. In a recent report on recreational data collection in the Maryland striped bass fishery, DNR highlighted several key data gaps, including information on recreational angler effort, specifically the number of trips, number of fish caught, the fate of those fish, and other biological details. This bill addresses these issues by requiring a pilot program for the consolidated boat fishing license, which currently allows unlicensed anglers to fish with a licensed captain under a single license. Those anglers are required to complete a free registration, but DNR believes there are high levels of non-compliance with this requirement, and SB 455 would place additional reporting responsibilities on license holders through a pilot program to see if this would increase compliance and improve angler data. Additionally, the bill would create a task force to address other issues with recreational angler data collection, including how to better reach and represent sectors of the fishery not typically sampled by other surveys. These task force recommendations would provide a basis for improving recreational fisheries data, science, and management well into the future. It's my understanding that CCA plans to offer amendments to correct the reference to the name of the license in the bill, and I just want to flag that we would support those amendments. Thank you, and we urge your favorable report on Senate Bill 455.
Ms. Colden, Dr. Colden. Is Mr. Farris with us? And Mr. Sikorsky? Why don't you move on the other end, and we'll hear from both of you, then take questions.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chairman, and the rest of the committee. I appreciate you letting me speak here today. I just want to say, don't want to reiterate the points that the other esteemed panelists have made, but I would like to make one little point, and that is I am the vice president of the St. Mary's County Watermen's Association. I've worn many hats in the striped bass fishery. I've been a commercial fisherman, a charter boat captain, and a recreational fisherman. Every fish that I've ever caught commercially or as a charter boat captain and operator has been recorded and reported. Not once has a fish that I've caught recreationally been reported or recorded. That has to be fixed some way, and I feel that Senator Bailey's bill has a very good chance of doing that. So in that regard, hopefully you guys would show favorable report for this bill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is David Sikorsky. Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, thank you. David Sikorsky, I'm the Executive Director of the Coastal Conservation Association of Maryland. We refer to as CCA. We are a recreational angling-based organization. Another hat I wear is the ongoing proxy for the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission for Delegate Dana Stein, so I sit on the striped bass board. But this bill is about more than striped bass. I also am the acting chair of the Sport Fisheries Advisory Commission to Maryland DNR, and helped craft this legislation with Delegate Jay Jacobs with the intent of improving data for recreational angling, because it is very important. Better data or more data always means more accurate information in surveys. And the real difference between recreational and commercial fishing is that recreational fishing is very broad. Any one of us could buy a license and choose to go fishing within regulations, and so it's very hard to track and really understand what recreational anglers may do. Commercial fishing is very different in that it's a business and it's very structured. And so from a survey perspective, that's the difference between a survey for recreational anglers and a census for commercial. And so they're very hard to compare, and that's why there is no reference or anything related to commercial fisheries in this bill. But by improving recreational fishing data, we can then better improve our science, which assesses the populations of these fish, namely striped bass. Senator Bailey, the bill that Senator Bailey mentioned, the study was specific to striped bass, and it does have really good information about steps that can be taken to improve recreational fishing data. And really, that's what the goal of the task force is here. It's to empower stakeholders like myself and others from the recreational fisheries from throughout Maryland to work with academic power, specifically University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, Morgan State Pearl Lab, University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and St. Mary's College, and maybe not just to bring fisheries understanding, but also anything mathematical. This is an exercise of trying to understand what's happening out there. So the idea is to empower stakeholders, come together, work with DNR, and figure out what bites of this really big elephant that we're trying to eat we should take first, because the data is very daunting.
Thank you. Not seeing any questions. Senator Bailey, a lot of support for this bill. We might have another one from Senator Bailey from EHE this year. Next one, I believe, is 580, sewer systems and wastewater treatment plants, water pollution. Senator Bailey will be followed by Mr. Farris, Mr. Brown, Mr. Mullen, and Ms. Dean, and Ms. Colden, Dr. Colden, and Dominic Butchko. So we have a bunch of folks. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Butchko opposes it, so we'll take questions before he comes up. The rest are written. Senator Bailey.
Thank you, Chairman Pinsky and members of the committee. Senator Bailey, District 29, St. Mary's and Calvert County. Today, for the record, on Senate Bill 580, sewer systems and wastewater treatment plants, water pollution, shellfish, harvester, restitution. This bill would require an entity that is responsible for a sewer overflow, treatment plant bypass, or unlawful discharge from a wastewater treatment plant that results in an area being closed to shellfish harvesting to pay restitution to affected shellfish harvesters. The idea from this bill came after conversations with local watermen following an incident that occurred in my district earlier this year, when a sewage leak resulted in the closure of a portion of the Potomac River in St. Mary's County, right off St. George's Island. This incident not only caused major inconvenience and loss of economic opportunity for the shellfish harvesters who normally operate in that portion of the Potomac, it also resulted in people becoming ill. This led to a misunderstandable hesitancy to purchase and eat Maryland oysters, regardless of whether they were harvested in the affected area, which resulted in further losses for the state's watermen. This Senate bill aims to hold those entities who are responsible for these sewage leaks accountable while providing relief to directly affected shellfish harvesters. This bill would require the payment of 3 times the economic value to a harvester who is able to demonstrate that they had caught oysters or clams in the closed area within the last 2 years. According to the fiscal note, the Department of the Environment reports that closure orders are rarely required and that there have only been 7 in the last 15 years. However, it's also notable that 5 of those 7 occurred in the last year. I am proposing 3 amendments to go along with this bill. I think you should have them. The first is to clarify that the bill is intended to provide damages and not restitution. The second is to add provisions that will ensure that the department provides the public with information about the procedures that are associated with closure orders to make sure that the public has the confidence that Maryland oysters are safe to eat. The third was introduced at the request of the Chesapeake Bay Foundation to ensure that the bill not only covers people with commercial license, but also aquaculture leaseholders along with the shellfish harvesters. That was an oversight on my part. One of the people I represent who could not be here today is Brian Russell. He's been here many times talking about aquaculture with this committee. He runs Sure Thing Shellfish LLC. And it is in you have his testimony. The biggest thing I'm going to point out is for the month of January 2021, Brian lost a whole month of work as a result of this, as a result of a sewage spill. This year, he lost another one between November and December. He has lost tens of thousands of dollars in his aquaculture business. He has no ability to recover it. I just took oysters up to Baltimore to my brother and sister-in-law's house to meet with them months after the sewage spill. Their whole community came over. We're going to eat oysters, and you know what they said? Where are they from? If they're from St. George's, we don't want them. And that's what we saw. We saw some of these watermen that are going to testify today. They lost $20 a bushel. And that's really, this is the time that these watermen make their money on oysters between, Thanksgiving and Christmas. One of the shuck houses down our way, he lost, in 1 week, lost $8 a gallon on the shuckers. That was his entire profit, right? So this was at no fault of their own, whether they were working on public bottom, whether they were working on leased bottom, whether it was wild oysters or it was an aquaculture. The people that have these spills should be responsible to pay the restitution and damages to these people. I respectfully request a favorable report.
My name is Robert T. Brown, President of the Maryland Watermen Association, Chair, and members of this committee. This is exactly what happened to us. After it came out in Virginia, some people got sick from some oysters that were ate there because the bottom hadn't been closed at due time. What happened was you try to sell your oysters around the house because I live close to that area and I work close to that area. I didn't work in that area exactly where it was at. But what happened was you go to sell an oyster, oh, no, I don't want no oysters. I might get sick from eating them. Here we are getting ready to go in our Christmas orders and stuff. And no, where I was getting $60 for a bushel of oysters that I was selling in my house, I could sell them wholesale for $40. No, we don't want none called up. Yes, I wanted 3 bushel this weekend. I want to cancel that order. And I mean, that's how it went on. I mean, and we hadn't done anything wrong, but these sewage spills go all the time. You keep seeing them time after time after time. And the thing about these sewage spills is it's not like an oil spill. An oil spill, if you have it, and we had one into the Patuxent River a number of years ago, it's all on the beaches, it's all on the shore. You see it, you got to clean it up. When you have one of these sewage spills, it dissipates, but that doesn't mean it's not there. And then the public opinion that goes out over the press is what kills our market. And we need some help on this. I'd like to see a favorable on this, and thank you very much.
Rachel Dean, Patuxent River Seafood. There's 2 things that I'd like to add to this, besides the fact that we did lose money per bushel, and we were actually turned around with some of our bushels from our buyer. The first one was that the most latest spill happened on the Potomac River, and while it wasn't geographically near us, what happened was because it went out to the public didn't understand the geography of the bay, of the rivers, so they just kind of made it a blanket statement, and it didn't matter where those oysters were coming from at that point. They just assumed that the oysters were not safe to eat. So that's the first thing. The second thing being that when I don't want the restitution, I'm sorry, Senator Bailey, I don't know what word we're using now. That's not what I'm after. I want this bill to be a deterrent. I want this bill to deter those people who are responsible for these spills from having these spills. I want them to look closer at it. I want them to make a change because it's actually the public opinion that we can't fight. It's not the immediate effects so much that Brian felt. So for that reason, I would like that you put forth a favorable.
Thank you. Let's take a few more witnesses, then we'll take questions in just a minute. I know I have a couple. Mr. Ferris, Mr. Mullen, Dr. Colden.
Go first. Ladies before gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Again, Dr. Allison Colden, Chesapeake Bay Foundation. SB 850 would allow shellfish harvesters to seek restitution and damages from entities that discharge sewage into the Chesapeake Bay. Untreated sewage, as you likely know, contains high levels of nutrients and bacteria which negatively impact water quality and can cause disease for animals and humans that come into contact with contaminated water. Oysters, clams, and other filter feeders filter out these bacteria, which can make people sick if they're consumed. The Maryland Department of Environment issues shellfish harvesting closures when sewage overflows occur to prevent harvest of shellfish from contaminated areas. These closures can last for weeks at a time, during which harvest from these areas is banned. These closures result in direct losses for harvesters, as you've heard, particularly aquaculture operators whose operations are place-based and linked to areas of the bay bottom that are leased from the state. They cannot move to other areas to harvest, like harvesters in the public fishery. Additionally, repeated contamination issues, as you've heard, undermine the public's confidence in Maryland seafood products. These sewage overflows are in no way caused by the operators, yet they bear the financial burden and stigma that damages their reputations and businesses. The amendments offered in our written testimony seek to add aquaculture operators explicitly to the definition of shellfish harvesters to ensure that they are also eligible. We urge your favorable report with amendments on Senate Bill 580. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mullen or Mr. Ferris?
I'll be brief, Mr. Chair. Jim Mullen, Maryland Oystermen Association. We're in favor of the bill, also with the amendments, just because of the collateral damage that the spills, the effect it has on the oyster public fishery bottom and also aquaculture. I have the privilege to sit on the Aquaculture Coordinating Council to represent MWA there. And there's been a steady transition more in the aquaculture arena to on bottom instead of cage. So, and I've learned a lot about the investment that goes in, not only into the aquaculture enterprise, but also the public fishery with the county oyster committees. And so once that investment's made and the oysters are polluted or damaged, so to speak, there's no recourse for that investment. So this provides that opportunity for that. Thank you.
Mr. Ferris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice, and the rest of the committee. Thank you for letting me be here again. My name is Jeff Ferris, Vice President of the St. Mary's County Watermen's Association, in case you forgot. Just everybody else has pretty much said everything I wanted to, so luckily I don't have to say it again. But I would like to make one point, just as I did before there. Just real quick, this morning I did a search on the internet, on the MDE's website. There was 1,062 overflows in the state of Maryland in 2021. At a meeting in Mr. Bailey's office, Senator Bailey's office, a few months ago, we met with the representatives from the Metcom Commission in St. Mary's County. There was 18 overflows in St. Mary's County last year. 2 of those spills resulted in closures of our oyster fishery grounds in certain areas of St. Mary's County. Like Ms. Dean said, I'd rather not get a penny of this money, but I am in support of this bill to hold the feet to the fire of these organizations that control these overflows and help stop this problem. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Senator Bailey, could you come back up to the table for a minute, please? A couple of questions. Hopefully you can help me and the committee. Is the wastewater treatment plant owned by the county or by a private entity?
Metcom is run by the county.
Okay, so basically you want to sue the county for damages? That's no value judgment. I just want to understand.
So this bill doesn't just hold people accountable in St. Mary's County. In different counties, they have different things. But it's not just a local bill. It applies to the whole state. But in St. Mary's County, yes, I am prepared to hold the county and Metcom responsible for what they've done to these watermen.
Okay, and the follow-up question, do you need legislation to sue the county? If the watermen were harmed, they lost obviously many bushels because of the bad publicity, obviously. Can you sue them now? I mean, is there any obstacle to a waterman having standing to go to court and say, MedCom did me wrong, and they should repay my lost wages?
With all due respect, the watermen, as you know them and I know them, and many of them are my friends, they are a hard-working group of people. Every day that they take, like today, to come up here is a day when they don't get paid. Any time that they would start a issue like a lawsuit against the county would be time that they would not be able to work and provide for their family. So the situation and why we brought this bill forward, and why I specifically brought it forward, was to be their mouthpiece and to be able to help them where larger institutions like the government or private entities do this with no disregard whatsoever to the watermen.
Okay, so I better understand it. So it's not a lawsuit. It would direct the department to order the person responsible for sewer overflow to make these payments.
That's correct.
I mean,
We're not, I'm not saying that we have to sue each one of them for, no.
okay, but again, if this gets to that level, I mean, there would be hearings and days of hearings and appeals to do this. I mean, they wouldn't just say, oh, you were harmed, send us a bill for lost sales, and they're going to submit a check. I mean, I'd be shocked if the department did that. And again, I'm not saying this is the wrong thing to do, and as you may know, our committee had the Secretary of the Environment before us 2 months ago with a lag time of the reporting of this very spill. So we are very sensitive and sympathetic to what happened, and particularly that it took so long to be corrected and the public know before they got sick. So we have called him on the carpet. We don't think MDE handled it very well. So you have sympathetic ears. We're just trying to understand how this will be implemented.
I can tell you exactly. I had been involved with several times where there was timber trespasses when we're talking about natural resource and people were taking other people's trees, whether they be off of their property or they be out of the median, wherever. The penalties was established by the General Assembly for anyone that did that, that affected that or affected those trees. It's automatic. 3 times that value of that tree. Not as it existed, but as that tree existed when it reached full maturity. And that's the way they did that. And that's openly accepted right now. And I have been involved with those. No prolonged court cases, no nothing. So that's where this came from.
Senator Ellis next.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator, thank you for this issue, very important issue. And I listened to the testimony and of witnesses also. And so a couple questions. So you said the county owns the sewer plant that's doing the unprocessed discharge of waste. So have you reached out to the county? And if you have, what was their reaction or answer?
So I can tell you this, that as soon as this happened, not only the watermen came to my office, but also the executives of Metcom. They were in my office. We had a meeting, filled the entire office, and everybody talked about exactly what we could do for the future. So to explain a little bit about this spill, this was at the end of October. It was a nor'easter storm. And the nor'easter storm came up with the high tides. And when the high tides came up, it put St. George's Island underwater. Okay, so that all the septic systems, everything were underwater. It was all flooded. And what happened was some people, there's about 800 people, I think it is, out there on St. Clement's Island, or St. George's Island. They went out there, they removed the tops of their septic system so that they tried to use the pumping system set up by the septic system to drain their yards. By doing so, they overwhelmed the pumping system, and they caused the flood. Right? The county was pumping 24/7. They had a bunch of people down there that were trying to keep up, but they'd never seen anything like this happen before. Now, MedCom is working diligently with those people. They are also making the caps and the things unable to be removed by the public, so this won't happen again. They are clearly working towards this, right? And they are working, but the fact is, there are thousands of spills like this every year. I worked for the Department of Natural Resources for 30 years. I know, I've been there, I've seen it in Charles County, I've seen it on the Eastern Shore, I've seen it all around where this happened. People, MedCom's we don't want this to happen again. We're going to do everything we can. The fact is, if we put a fine mechanism in place, because there's not one that exists with them where the watermen get paid, the only person that gets the shaft, so to speak, is the oystermen.
So you say MedCom. Who's MedCom?
It is the organization in St. Mary's County that handles water and sewer.
So that's a county agency.
Yes.
So what you're saying is that they're not really responsive to this issue. That's why you have to champion this.
I'm championing this for the whole state, not just for St. Mary's County.
Well, I mean, you're using that example in St. Mary's. So I love that transition. Thank you for that. So for the whole state, we've been dealing with a lot of issues in this committee with the MDE, Maryland Department of Environment, don't have the necessary inspectors to inspect, to go out and actually make sure these plants, sewage plants, and others up to par. And so have you reached out to like the Maryland Department of the Environment through the governor's office to say, hey, help us to protect our citizens, help us to protect our watermen and others? Have you done that?
So have I, and yes, I have, and let me tell you, the next day after I met with these watermen and I saw what was happening, there's no doubt about it. The one thing I asked is I wanted somebody, whether it be a Secretary of Department of Natural Resources or the Secretary of the Environment, to simply make a public statement saying, other than in this area, all oysters are safe to eat. And we pleaded with those secretaries to do it. And they would not, and they refused. And that's why the second part of this bill is in there that says when there's a spill, right, they have to go ahead and put the notice requirements up so the people know, but the people also know that the oysters outside of this are safe to eat, because their lack of being responsive to the requests of the watermen, the requests of me, right, led to further damages, financial damages to these constituents.
Okay, well, thank you for your answer, Senator.
Thank you. That concludes the hearing on this legislation. I'm sorry, I apologize. Moving too quickly. Mr. Butchko, in opposition from Mako.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for having me here today. Dominic Butchko from the Maryland Association of Counties. Mako asks for an unfavorable report on this bill. I think it's safe to say that Maryland's seafood industry is at the core of this state's economy and a central piece of this state's identity. Ensuring seafood is harvested out of the Chesapeake Bay watershed is not only a matter of public health and economic necessity, but it also speaks to the heart of what it means to be a Marylander. That being said, we need to consider weighing sensible policy. SB 580 would empower costly litigation and an overly burdensome restitution structure that would place significant pressure on municipal solid waste treatment plants. Targeting these plants when they are in most critical need of resources is a recipe for ever-degrading policy scenarios. You just heard from the good senator a scenario where these overflows happens due to a nor'easter. This bill, last week we were considering climate legislation. These freak disasters are going to happen more and more due to an ever-degrading climate situation. The intent of SB 508 is noble, but the effect would be costly and take the resources away that would be necessary to solve the problem. Accordingly, Mako asks for an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Butchko, Vice Chair?
Mr. Butchko, Senator Bailey is clearly, in addition, well, he has said multiple times that this is a statewide bill. Clearly, there was a problem in St. Mary's County and with MedCom and stuff. How can he get any sort of reassurance that St. Mary's County, or frankly, all 24 counties, are paying attention to, sufficient attention and oversight to contractors who provide critically important public health services like water and sewer treatment?
You know, I want to make sure that I accurately articulate myself. So I think broadly there are a lot of challenges with the wastewater disposal industry right now. One of our biggest issues is ensuring that we have adequate staff. On the Attorney General's bill, for example, one of the things that we want to make sure in the amendments is that you can't go after wastewater treatment facility staff. This is an incredibly complex area to get the right people. So how can we ensure that? Making sure that there's the right training programs and resources, making sure that the counties are supported, making sure that these agencies that are running these adequately have what they need to do their job. This is a statewide bill, and it's going to take statewide resources to fix the issue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. It's not a statewide issue. Frederick County doesn't dump stuff into oyster bars. There's probably a handful of counties that really are at risk here. If I'm standing on the street corner and a state truck runs me over, do I have a recourse?
I believe so, yes.
State's self-funded. We go to the state treasurer. Now it's Treasurer Davis. If I'm sitting in a street corner and I get hit by a truck from Anne Arundel County, do they have a self-insurance fund?
I believe so, yes.
I'm sorry, if you're responsible for damage, you need to pay. Mr. Chairman, I'll be very supportive of this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I don't have a question, but I have a statement I'd like to make. You know, I've monitored this whole session, the positions that Mako normally take on bills that come before this committee. I guess I'm still trying to understand how Mako policies and decision-making structural to help those of us who trying to bring some type of relief to our communities. It appears to me that most of the time, 80% of the time, your policy and your decision-making versus always on the other side. And it makes me feel sad to know that, you know, I have been in a position where I have basically provided lots of resources to Mako. And yet then my municipality, you know, paying for registrations and all that stuff to come to your activities that you sponsor annually in Ocean City, if you will. And then when I sit here and observe, it looked like you always anti what needs to be done to help to bring relief. Is there any, you know, why is that?
Well, Senator, that actually makes me really sad that you think that we're anti to bring relief. I think so. I've been at Mako since August, and the one thing that I think is great about the organization is that we always want to be a partnership with the state. Every solution, it might not be what might be obvious to people who bring stuff here, but we take everything with how can we partner with the state? How can we partner with our other counties? How can we partner with agencies? How can we work together? This is an issue. No one wants to dump sewage in any river or harm the economy in any way through this. So we want to partner with you to fix this, and in general, just in anything.
Okay, thank you.
Senate Bill 876, Civil Penalty Surcharge Oyster Repletion Fund. You will be joined by Mr. Farris, Mr. Mullen, and Mr. Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Senator Bailey, District 29, St. Mary's and Calvert County. Last bill of the day that I'm going to talk about, Senate Bill 876, Water Pollution Civil Penalty Surcharge, Oyster Repletion Fund. I'm writing to introduce this bill today to establish a surcharge on civil penalties imposed for water pollution violations that result in the discharge of pollutants into the Chesapeake Bay or its tributaries. This bill would establish the Oyster Repletion Fund in the Department of Natural Resources to finance the repletion of natural oyster bars in waters impacted by water pollution violation. This surcharge would go to the fund created by this bill. The fund would also be able to accept funds from the state budget or other sources as available. This bill requires, to the extent practical, revenue collected from the surcharge would be used to fund oysters projects in the county where the water pollution violation occurred, and they would consult with the county's oyster committee. The bill also includes a provision that states that these funds are intended to be supplemental and not replace other funding appropriated for oyster repletion projects. This is another tool to hold the people who violate our waterways accountable. This surcharge will ensure that entities that release sewage into the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries pay to repair the damage that these pollutants cause to oyster population in our state's waterways. I'm also introducing, I think you have it, an amendment with this bill which clarifies that the surcharge would apply to administrative penalties as well as civil penalties. I respectfully request a favorable report with this amendment on Senate Bill 876. I turn it over to my distinguished panel.
Senator Bailey, just so you know, the amendment is not in the folder yet, so we'll watch for it. But please, Mr. Brown, Mr. Ferris, Mr. Harrison?
Go ahead. You sure? Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Ferris.
My name's Jeff Ferris,
Yeah.
Vice President, St. Mary's County Waterman Association. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and the rest of the committee for letting me speak once again. And we are in favor, or we support this bill and hope you guys show a favorable report. One thing I'd like to say, though, just real quick to this one senator's questions, a few senators' questions about the being a county thing. I just want to make a point that this is not the only place that this happens where there's a closure because of a sewage spill. It happens across the state on the Chesapeake Bay. So it's not just a St. Mary's County thing. I wanted to make that clear. There's other bars that are closed because of the same issues. And I appreciate you. Thank you very much. And but that was the main point I wanted to make. And also that anytime we're able to put something back on the bottom for oyster repletion, it's a good thing. Like I said before, rather not it come from this fund. I'd rather have clean water to work in and not have to worry about this issue, but we all know that's not going to probably happen unless it's a perfect world. So with that being said, anytime we can put spat on shell back down on a place where we can work, we're going to be in support. So we hope you guys show a favorable report. And I'd like to real quick thank Senator Bailey for both of these bills, for all the bills and all the work he's done for us in the past in St. Mary's County. And we greatly appreciate his efforts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ferris. Mr. Brown?
Robert T. Brown, President of the Maryland Waterman Association.
Mr. Brown, you're not signed up on this bill.
Was supposed to be on it. We put it in
James
for
Mullen and Herman Harrison are the other two. I'll allow it, but normally we don't.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Mother Nature is very, 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 very strong because she's been able to take the abuse that we have given her from all the sewage treatment plants, these spills that we have from it all the times, and she still seems to recover and come back some. These spills that we have, it is so many, and it happens so often, it deteriorizes the water quality in the bay. However, when this happens, we need to have some help to put some oysters back to help filter the water. This this is, Mother Nature is just amazing how she can do it. We have all these sewage treatment plants all the time that's putting all this effluent out in there, and she does well with that. But when we have these spills, and I know they're not intentional, but you know, accidents do happen. If you have an accident, you have to try to put down and restitution for it, and that's all we're asking for. We're not asking for money itself. We're asking to plant oysters in different places of the bay where it happened at, to help put filters in the water, to help clean these spills up, and to help clean the bay at all times. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Calling again, I think Mr. Mullen. Okay, so.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. We're supportive of the bill because it creates the opportunity to reseed an area and reshell an area if any of this type of water pollution damage has been done. So really, this collateral damage when it happens, God forbid, this bill here just provides that opportunity to make that investment in the investment that was lost due to the damage. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mullen. Thank you for your brevity in your testimony. Senator Hester has a question for some number of you, or for Senator Bailey. Go for it.
Madam Chair. Senator Bailey, thank you for bringing these bills to our committee. I just had a bigger picture question. Why are these effluent overflows happening in the first place? Is it all flooding induced? Because it seems like we should do everything you're saying, but if we could actually solve the problem, like, that would be wonderful too.
Very unfortunate situation that we have occurring. Sometimes they are caused by high tide, but the issue is, if you heard Mr. Ferris's testimony, he said this morning he found over 1,000 sewage spills in Maryland this year. A lot of them were not right there by the water, but they did cause problems going into tributaries up above. And there is a lot of them. I think you've heard from the Secretary of the Department of the Environment. They don't have enough inspectors, right? This is something that is occurring. It is something that deters from our water quality all across the entire state. I know from working with Delegate Jacobs, he has a report from the last 2 years that lists over 2,000 spills in Maryland.
Senator Riley, sir.
Senator, isn't it also true there's an awful lot of spillage due to energy, electricity failure, and mechanical failure?
That is correct.
Thank you. On page 5 of your bill, you talk about the fund can be used to cover reasonable administrative expenses. Did you discuss any special percentage, maximum allowable administrative expenses when you were putting the bill together?
No, sir. This is a brand-new fund.
Yeah, I understand that.
Right.
But this is the administrative expenses that are going to the contracted nonprofit organization. And I don't want them to take 50% of the allocation for their administrative funds. We want them to put as much money possible back into the project that's going to be moving forward. Would you have any objection to establishing a percentage?
No, I would not, and I would be more than happy to work with the committee to come up with a reasonable percentage.
Yeah. Reasonable is very vague and soft, and I think we
Right,
we
a
can
reasonable
establish a max.
percentage
Yeah,
to actually be more
we can
suc-
establish a max. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Thank you, Senator Riley. I see no other questions. We are done with Senator Bailey Day and EHE. That completes the hearing on Senate Bill 876. Thank you, Senator Bailey. Always good to have you here.
Thank you very much, and until next week, because we have another round.
All right. Nope, we're not. 3 more bills. Okay, next bill. Then we're going to vote. Yes, Senator Riley, Senate Bill 713, Anne Arundel County Natural Resources, Fish and Gear. Senator Riley. And Christopher Warthen, Matthew Listman, and Emily Petrowski. Nope, not Emily yet. Christopher Warthen and Matthew Listman can join the good senator at the table.
Madam Vice Chair, do you know that Crofton is ground central for snakeheads?
Oh, my gosh, I do now.
We had such a problem. The Maryland Department of the Environment came in and poisoned 2 ponds right across the street from my house. And it was so bad, at one point, we had 12 national television stations come recording what was happening. And from that, we actually had a movie made. It was really something. You talk about problems with reputation with oysters. How'd you like to eat a fish from the Crofton pond? So the story behind the story is, in front of the pond was a Chinese restaurant. The fellow who owned it had a sister who was ill. He had a fish sent from China. The sister recovered and the fish showed up, so he dumped it in the pond. This snakehead has been prolific. It has invaded the Potomac River, Chesapeake Bay, Severn River, all over the place. And the problem with them is there's no natural predator, and they are a ferocious eater of our natural fish. This bill extends the ability to fish snakeheads with a bow and arrow. Currently, it's restricted, and this removes the restriction for a bow and arrow. We can't do a whole lot of damage with a bow and arrow in terms of taking out too many fish, but the snakeheads are particularly large, easy targets. There are several letters of opposition to talk about nets. Well, we're not expanding any netting. We're not expanding anything with big commercial haul nets. This is adding bows and arrows to our toolbox for fishing in a very restricted area defined by the bill. Request a favorable report.
Riley, I am tempted to ask whether the horse people are opposed, but I'm not going to do that. All right. Christopher Warthen, welcome. No, I'm not listening. Okay, so Christopher Warthen is the lead witness. You need to come on up.
And you got 5 minutes.
You can speak up to 5 minutes, but we're not sure it's going to actually take you that long.
I was told I can only have 2, so I'll be
2
quick.
is perfect. Welcome to EHE.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for allowing me to be here today, and thank you, Senator Riley, for introducing this. My name is Christopher Warthen. It is an honor to be here to testify before you today. You have my written testimony, and I'm going to try to summarize that in 2 minutes. We have a problem with the northern snakehead destroying our fishery and ecosystem. They're eating everything, including the juvenile rockfish, soft crabs, and other fish that have struggled to maintain a healthy population over the years. Research shows that the snakehead are reproducing at an alarming rate. One fish can lay up to 75,000 eggs in 1 year. They're not going away, and we need to manage the population before this destructive invasive species takes over. One affordable and effective way to manage the population is bow fishing. Unfortunately, current outdated regulations don't allow this on selected rivers. According to Article 4-714, passed in 2013, that states, rod, hook, and line are the only means allowed to catch fish. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this was passed to prevent large commercial fishing operations from clouding the highly recreational tributaries of the bay. I had to make many calls to confirm that this was in fact illegal. The first time I called DNR, I was told to go and do it, shoot as many as you can. And then after questioning and talking to many people, there were only a few officials that actually knew that this law even existed. And prior to that, I had used a cast net to catch bait and called DNR to make sure that what I was catching to go catch rockfish was legal, and they said, yep, no problem. They had no idea. Current funding for the Chesapeake Bay is $138.1 million. We're taking actions to clean up the water and help all sea life survive and flourish. Unfortunately, that also helps the destructive invasive species. We need to be allowed to do our part in managing the fishery. Bow fishing is an effective and affordable place to start. I've enjoyed fishing since the first day my grandfather ever took me. I've spent thousands of hours on the water introducing kids and young adults of all ages to fishing and crabbing. Someday I hope to pass this level on to my grandkids. I'm open to any and all ideas to manage this invasive species and fully committed to do my part in preserving our fisheries and waterways. Today, I'm asking you to do your part and pass Senate Bill 713. Thank you for your time.
Then, and now Matthew Listman.
Yep. Just like Chris there, my name's Matt Listman. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Just like Chris, I ran into the same problem. I sent, my first encounter was I was out bow fishing in the Magothy River, not knowing that this law actually exists. I was following the guidelines that's given to me when I buy a fishing license, like everybody else that gets one. It clearly has a bow fishing section where it tells you which species of fish you're allowed to not harvest. So we're not going after any endangered species. Most of the species that we are going after are the invasive species that basically wreak havoc on our environment. With that being said, I was approached by an officer. He made me aware of this law. I then sent out a flurry of emails, ran into other officers that didn't know how to even go about writing a ticket for this law, because after they read the law, there was a lot of other stuff in it that didn't make sense. I am now a commercial fisherman now. I went and got registered because that's how much I support this bill, is to be able to, if we're going to be able to do this and it's going to go to the commercial side, I'm ready to pay to play, so to speak, because it's our part to help the environment, and plus it's something that I enjoy doing. So if I got to pay a couple extra bucks, I'll pay a couple extra bucks. I did learn it's going to cost a pretty penny if you decide to do this. Upwards, I think it's $350 some odd dollars to be exact. I had to buy a $215 harvester registration license. There is a bow fishing, commercial bow fishing stamp already, which is $15. I had to buy a hook and line, because this is going to go underneath the hook and line, which is $100. And then they hit you with a seafood charter marketing surcharge, non-dealer,
Thank you.
$20.
Thank you, Mr. Listman. All right, thank you for your testimony and your advocacy. That's really helpful information. I have a couple questions. Senator Riley, if you wouldn't mind coming back up.
Sure.
I am so curious. You can stay up, Mr. Wortham. We're trying to do socially distanced, but three, most people are okay with that. What happened is the restaurant still there? Were there any consequences for the owner who started this whole nightmare? And does anyone eat snakeheads?
Snakeheads. Yes, the restaurant's still there. No, there was no repercussion. And yes, there are a few folks who like it. It has to be prepared in a very special way. It's a natural fish from China, so there are some folks of that area that do find it acceptable. Most of us don't. And that's the other thing I forgot to tell you is a walking fish, and that's one of the problems. It can survive out of the water for several minutes and flop down the path into another body of water. And that also contributes to its spread.
Okay, so in addition to MedCom, we should be from St. Mary's County, that Chinese restaurant, man, that's amazing. I see no other lights up. Thank you, Senator Bailey. Thank you, Mr. Litzman.
Thank
Mr.
you. Thank you so
Warthen,
much.
for your testimony. That completes the hearing on Senate Bill 713. Back to the chair.
Senator Gallion, you're up. 680, Playground Accessibility Communication Boards. We'll have Senator Gallion and then take questions, then have Mr. Butchko in opposition. Then we'll do the Cecil County, which Senator Gallion will present.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, fellow committee members. Good afternoon. For the record, Senator Jason Gallion here, introducing Senate Bill 680, State and Local Parks Playground Accessibility Communication Board.
Senator, sorry to interrupt you. Did we hear from Ms. Piotrowski?
Oh, you know what? I thought I didn't. Okay, I apologize. Emily Petrowski was unfavorable on the last bill.
Just come over the
Senator
MC.
Riley, just so you know. Sorry.
Sorry.
Sorry about that, Ms. Petrowski, please.
No worries.
I thought you were just waving to be friendly. I wasn't sure. Hi, nice to see you. Yes, please.
Mr.
So guys,
Chairman.
we're back at Snakeheads, just to recalibrate your brains. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee, my name is Emily Petrowski, and I'm a high school student in Anne Arundel County and I'm resident of District 33. I am here to urge an unfavorable report on Senate Bill 713. Currently, Anne Arundel County has a hook and line fishing regulation. This regulation protects finfish in the Chesapeake Bay by not disturbing the underwater habitat and reducing bycatch. 713 allows for commercial bow fishing. It does not specify what it means to have fishing restrictions only applicable to commercial finfish harvesters. This opens the question of what, if at all, recreational fishing regulations remain in Anne Arundel County. As a resident, I worry for the safety of people in the water and the impact of fish populations in the Chesapeake Bay that would come from this bill. Anne Arundel County is a populated area, and bow fishing could cause harm to pet, person, or property. The land that surrounds would be more open for bow fishing would pass by schools, homes, and parks. Furthermore, archery equipment is only restricted on some finfish species. My written testimony specifies which one. Notably having the striped bass, hybrids, and species listed as threatened or endangered. This allows all other finfish to be commercially harvested with no other listed regulations. I do understand the need for snakeheads to be hunted, but the bill does not ever specify invasives or snakeheads. Additionally, SB 713 is not an accessible bill to the public. It is confusing to the average person due to its wording and lack of explanation on the effects of recreational fishing. With that, I urge an unfavorable report on Senate Bill 713. Thank you.
So, Ms. Petrowski, you're in high school?
Yeah.
You're amazing. So, separate from whatever position, I mean, I just think, so pets, persons, and parks, you're a great writer. I hope you stay with it. Senator Riley has a question for you.
Where do you go to school?
I go to Broadneck High School. I'm a senior.
Very good. Congratulations. Well done.
Thank you.
There's two parts of bills and formation of laws. One of them is the written testimony. The other is the intent that is expressed in committee and on the floor. It is my intent that it's just bow hunting into the water, not out into the neighborhoods, in the parks, and the playgrounds. And we don't want to extend commercial fishing in any other way, except this gentleman who is up here at the table has a commercial fishing license, but it's not his full-time job. He's not going to be out there 7 days a week feeding his family. He just wants the ability to do it on a regular, reoccurring basis. And we appreciate your testimony. It was very well done. Thank you.
So, Ms. Petrowski, I'm betting that Senator Riley is going to think about your testimony and maybe follow up with you and see whether there's an amendment for the committee to consider or whatever, but we're really glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck to you. Do you have any idea what's next for you?
College.
Yeah, where?
University of, Coastal Carolina University or Eckerd College to double major in marine science and environmental studies.
Wow, awesome. Well, we wish you the best of luck. Thank you
Thank you.
for being with us today. Now that completes the hearing on Senate Bill 713. Sorry, with apologies to Senator Gallion.
No problem resetting here. Once again, Senator Jason Gallion here to introduce Senate Bill 680, State and Local Parks, Playground Accessibility Communication Boards. This bill requires the Department of Natural Resources and each local governing body responsible for the construction of playgrounds to construct a communication board in each playground under its jurisdiction by October 1st, 2027. Communication boards allow individuals with limited language skills or that are nonverbal to express themselves and communicate with others. These communication boards can be essential for children who have autism spectrum disorder or intellectual disabilities. Howard County has actually begun to install communication boards at all county playgrounds, and I think this is certainly an initiative the state should follow as well. Also, recently in my home county of Harford County government built a sensory trail playground for children with disabilities. I think as parents, we sometimes can take for granted that while our children are enjoying themselves on the playground, that it may not be that way for all children. Senate Bill 680 would ensure that children of all abilities are able to enjoy and have fun at our local playgrounds. Thank you, and I ask the committee for a favorable report on SB 680.
Questions for the good senator? I have one. In some of the parks in my district, if they're in a town, for example, they'll put up a board for community notices to communicate a program or a upcoming activity or a whatever. I mean, that's not what you intend here, correct?
This would be more tailored to folks that have differing abilities, kind of help them so that, you know, they could enjoy those specific playground facilities.
But it's parks and playgrounds, right, or not?
Correct.
I'm sorry? Okay. I stand corrected. Thank you, Senator.
Yep.
Seeing no further questions, we'll go to the opposition. Mr. Butchko. I think it's Mr. Butchko, right? Yes.
The mean guy.
On the opponents pretty frequently today.
I was just going to say, lucky me. Feel like Darth Vader. Okay. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much. My name is Dominic Butchko, and I work for the Maryland Association of Counties. MACO asked that the committee give SB 680 an unfavorable report. Hallmark of program open space is the speed and discretion that it grants to counties in how best to expand and manage public spaces in their communities. By mandating such an expense, this goes against the original design of program open space. It hampers a county's ability to pursue more cost-effective and innovative solutions that may be more appropriate for their community. Now, I do want to say I did speak with Senator Gallion on potential solutions for this bill. One of them would be a central procurement where a planned use by local parks or a local opt-in to ride on a statewide contract that could promote wider adoption of this technology. But as written, SB 680 would impose a costly mandate on local parks, and accordingly, MACO urges an unfavorable report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Butchko, I'm glad you spoke with Senator Gallion. I don't know if you were here when I asked a question about another bill and making sure that it was multilingual and also accessible with a visual graphic and not just words, because we do want to, I think that was the Hedelman bill. I think we do want to be as collaborative and inclusive as we can, whether it's people with disabilities or people for whom English is not their primary language. So the idea of coming up with some middle ground is a good idea, and I would love to hear more as well. So as you communicate with Senator Gallion, if you want to keep me in the loop or something, I'd love to think outside the box, or think outside the park boundaries or whatever, and see whether there's something we can come up with that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chair, I just had a question of clarification. Could you guys, it's my understanding that these boards are not like to communicate about the park or the playground, but it's actually like a tool that people use to communicate. So they could be mass purchased because they could all be the same. It's not like park specific. Is that correct? I mean, maybe if you guys could just tell us exactly what a board is and does, that'd be helpful.
So my understanding from my parks people is that they help a child communicate what they're feeling, if they're having a good time, et cetera. About your point, could they be mass purchased? So this bill specifically requires program open space funds to be used, and depending on the county, those funds could be rather limited. A cost estimate for these boards would be $1,500 to $2,000 a pop. So that can quickly add up depending on the number of parks, if it has to go into a school park as well, et cetera. So working with the state, perhaps we can get that cost down, but on a county per county basis, that's really going to eat away at parks open space funding.
Thank you. How would you deal with, like a federal law, you are required by law to ensure that accessibility must be provided to all. So if they are not getting those kind of things, are you denying due process to that population of people?
I'm not sure I entirely understand your question, but what I will say, especially listening to the good senator's testimony, counties are already taking action on this. I believe you said in Harford County they have a new sensory park, and their trail, or the whole The whole county is doing that on their own. Howard County is taking actions on their own. MACO is not against making sure that everyone can enjoy public spaces. We're just against, is this the right solution for everybody? I think we should encourage innovation of our local parks department, and frankly, they're some of the most innovative and amazing people you will ever meet. And give them the resources to say what is best for your community, and to encourage that this particular group is able to enjoy public spaces as much as everyone else.
Okay, thank you.
The last one of the day. Senator Gallion is handling this for Cecil County. He will be joined by Mr. Mullen, who's the lead witness, Mr. Robert T. Brown, and Jim Klein.
Good afternoon. Once again, Senator Jason Gallion here on behalf of the Cecil County Senators to introduce Senate Bill 900, Cecil County Fishing Restrictions. When you look at the Cecil County Senators, it's a pretty small group. It's myself and Senator Steve Hershey, just so everybody knows. This bill establishes that provisions that give a riparian property owner or occupant first choice to set or position a net or haul sign to catch fish for commercial use in front of the property do not apply to Cecil County. After doing some research, this language goes as far back as the 1800s and is certainly outdated due to the number of condos and other homes that have become prevalent on the shore. With passage, Cecil County would join Anne Arundel, Kent, Queen Anne's, Calvert, and Somerset counties not requiring this provision. There is one amendment that clarifies pound nets may not be able to be placed in the Susquehanna River in Cecil County rather than the current language stating all nets. And I think that was in your bill folder. There was some concern, I believe, from DNR, and I think this would address that. Thank you, and I respectfully ask a favorable report on this local bill, SB 900.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members. I'm here on behalf of the Cecil Hartford chapter of the Maryland Watermen's Association. That individual had a doctor's appointment today. But just a brief history lesson here. This law, we approached the Cecil County delegation a year and a half ago about how outdated this law was. So we're trying to get Cecil County in compliance with state law. And basically, this addresses the issue back to the 1800s when you had land barons that owned large parcels of waterfront land, and they had tenant farmers, and the land barons allowed the tenant farmers to set nets off their shoreline for extra income. And the idea with the written permission was the adjacent land baron couldn't come over and set nets without receiving the permission of that particular owner. And then over time, as these large parcels of land became developed into single-family homes, townhouses, and condominiums, it became burdensome to try to go to a condominium complex with 200 or 300 units, and you had to individually contact each of those unit owners, or if you had a residential single-family subdivision that had, say, 100 homes, you'd have to contact all 100 of those folks. So this was a law we discovered that had been buried since the 1800s, going back to that time period. And so not asking for anything more than what's already allowed by law. We abide by that. It's just a matter of this contacting the waterfront property owner. And now it's become property owners, plural. So we're just trying to get in compliance with state law, and you'll see in the bill, the list of the counties that, we're just asking Cecil County to just join those other counties that don't require this contacting the property owner to do this. You're already allowed to do it by state law. We're not asking for anything additional, just this contacting the property owner. And if you understood the history piece I just explained. Thank you.
Robert T. Brown, President of the Maryland Watermen's Association, Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of this committee. We're in favor of this with the amendments, and Mr. Mullen and the Senator has explained this very well. We just want to be able to come in and fish in there and get so we can keep our industry going. Thank you very much.
Questions? Questions? Seeing none. Is Mr. Klein here or not?
Yes.
You want to join?
I want the social distance. Keep my distance from these guys.
That means I'll go to the back.
I'd like to thank the commission for hearing us today. I'm Jimmy Klein, fifth generation Cecil County waterman. My grandfather was one of the tenant farmer / fishermen that the gentleman earlier was talking about. And this law goes back so far when we first started to question the DNR on how we could change it, and they're the ones directed us to do it through legislation. They couldn't even find when this law was written in their archives. That's how old it is. And where the problem comes in is when you build a pound net, you build it for that specific site. You go to the DNR, you apply for a permit to set it in that site. If it's not going to interfere with navigation, they'll grant you permission to set it there if you know everything's the way they want it. And I have a site that I've had that was my grandfather's site. So that site's probably been in my family 90 years. And about 3 years ago, that property changed owners. I just built a new net for that site, cost me $8,500 to build that net. That property changed owners. The new owner who came there from California said he didn't want that net there no more. He's not going to give me written permission. And there I am with a pocket full of tickets, $8,500 net, set in a spot that my family's been setting a net since the late 1800s, and all of a sudden you can't do it anymore. And in Cecil County, we share the Sassafras River with Kent County. If you're on that side of the river, you don't need written permission. If you're on our side of the river, you do. We're just trying to get Cecil County in line with all the other counties in the state, that a landowner can't control the activities that's happening in tidal waters of the county. And I'd like to ask a favorable recommendation from the committee, and thank you for hearing our point.
Thank you, Mr. Klein. Senator Washington.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Senators, for this bill. I just want to understand what the bill is doing. I see on page 2, line 15, that you're adding Cecil to these other counties, right? Anne Arundel, if I have the right bill, this is Senate Bill 900, okay. But then you're doing something else. So you would be changing what is currently law, not just for Cecil, but you would be changing it for the other counties. So I just want to understand what's happening in this section 4-717.
Sure, so that line that starts at 17, on 19, it says Susquehanna River. So it's not changing it for the whole state. It's pertaining to the Susquehanna River in Cecil County.
So is it taking, okay, then,
So
what's it doing? It's
so-
removing, I see something being removed, I just don't.
With the amendment, and I'll let you speak to this as well. The Susquehanna River, it's pretty shallow. You're limited to, the nets and what you can use. So we were trying to get this set right. We work with the watermen and talk to DNR, just trying to get that cleared up. But the original bill, before we put in the amendment, there was some confusion in there.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah,
We're not trying to include or exclude anything new. We're just trying to get the county in regulation with the whole rest of the state. And the Susquehanna is an area that we're not asking to set pound nets there. Nobody ever has set them there, and you won't be able to set them there because of the topography of the river.
Well, so I guess it's not my expertise, but being in the committee for 3 years, it does, Senator, I see you're talking about Halsane, and so now I understand, since I've had hearings, that that's a specific kind of fishing process. So I don't know, is that and I don't know if there's a one-to-one correspondence between setting a pound net or stake and establishing a Holstein fishery, and then it's also, it talks about commercial, so that's what I'm wanting to understand.
Setting a pound net stake
Is that-
and establishing a Holstein fishery, that's two completely different types of gear.
Okay,
And the way the law is currently written for Cecil County to engage in either type of gear, you would have to have that landowner's written permission. And it's so unclear of the landowner's written permission that we've even run into a problem where you'd have a net on one side of the river and somebody that lived 3/4 or a mile away on the other side of the river didn't like it there, and they would call the authorities on you.
I do understand, and I guess we'll talk about this when it comes to the vote, but, so just, so that I understand, I'd see and get where you're wanting to remove the consent of the owner for setting a pound net.
Correct.
But at least as this bill is drafted, in addition, since you said that setting a pound net and a stake net is different from a Holstein fishery operation, which I believe there's some debate about that. It does seem like it's doing both things. So on the one hand, the bill is removing the permission, but it's also establishing for commercial use this additional process. So that's my question.
Well, we're already currently allowed to fish with both types of nets in Cecil County
Okay.
commercially.
Okay,
This is just removing ancient
yeah, no,
wording that says you have to have that landowner's permission.
yeah, I mean, we
to do
really
so.
should revise laws that are written, in the 1800s and
I
things like
agree.
that. Yeah, absolutely. But so I support that. I support bringing into modern terms, this. So I just want to make sure that we're not doing something additional. So
No, we're not
I'll just
adding
find out.
anything.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. And I
Thank
appreciate the
you.
story.
Fine, thanks for staying with us this late.
Thank you, sir.
Have a safe ride home. Concludes our hearings for the